How are you?
All right.
Good.
Nice to see you. Oh, I don't have a name tag.
I forgot mine.
Yeah, we don't really.
What?
We don't have one yet at all. Or,
No, and you know what? Let me double check because we added it and then there was a misspelling. And let me just double check because I don't know if we.
Okay.
We'll
Let's make sure it's N-E-R-E-N. No, usually, but like the other day, everybody was wearing a tag.
that's the only time we really need to wear them. And most people forget them half the time anyway.
Yeah, so this is another thing.
But yeah, they're like public events. I mean, it's curious to see. So what, Susan, what does yours say on it? Under your name?
That's a good question.
Does it say the whole committee?
Yeah, it says the whole name, Parks
Okay.
and Recreation Advisory Committee.
See, I have 3
Well, no, we just.
because they keep changing it, mine. But none of them, one says the whole thing right now. One just says PROSTAC member in quotation marks, member. And then one says chair, but not what committee I'm chairing.
Oh, that's silly.
That's not fair.
I would wear the one with quotation marks.
Yeah,
That's
really.
the first one. Yeah.
Not at the small table?
I know, yeah.
You're at the kids' table.
Please.
Very healthy water, so it was a bit of a.
Well, I think it's interesting.
Okay, so
Totally unorganized.
Tonight.
let's call to order this meeting of PROSTAC, April 19th, 2017. Kelly and George are not here. Ron will be there eventually.
Kelly's absent as well.
Yeah. So we kind of allotted some time for public comment in case anyone was here for the Lakeshore discussion, but just like the last board meeting, no one actually showed up. So, we'll just jump ahead. So the first discussion item will be Lakeshore though. So most of us were at the board dinner, and if you weren't, then you've probably seen some of the discussion. Was it only Corbett that wasn't at the, you weren't?
I wasn't there, no, I was in Copenhagen.
So I think everyone else was there, right? That's at the table right now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not me, I think that was
Yeah, and
before
Kelly
my
was here
time.
too.
No, you were there.
Kelly was there. I mean.
At the board dinner when we, well, it was the special session.
Oh, the
Yeah.
late lunch.
I think so.
Yeah, the late
Okay,
lunch.
yes. I was there, yes.
The early dinner, late lunch.
Okay,
Dinner is in the biggest meal of the day.
okay,
It was the show up at 4 p.m.
okay. I remember that, yes.
Can we turn the volume down? Because I'm hearing a serious echo.
It's
No,
because
that's kind
this is
of
for
the-
you.
Right there.
You try to move them maybe, or put one of them on the table.
Yeah, just set it back.
There we go.
I feel like I'm in a
All right, so I think we all know what the opportunity is with Lakeshore. So the discussion point tonight is whether or not this committee wants to make a recommendation one way or another to the board, specifically on Lakeshore. We don't have to make a recommendation, but I have a feeling that at some point in this process, the board's probably going to want to know where PROSTAC stands. So, where we left off last month was that we were preparing to make a recommendation on a new, a potential new facility. Then Lakeshore came up. So do we want to make a recommendation regarding Lakeshore?
Could you just spend, since I wasn't there at the supper, just 30 seconds and say, how did this come about? Was this something that the Lakeshore brought to the city or the city brought to Lakeshore? I just kind of want to know that.
Yes.
That just.
Well, I mean, Patrick can be a little more specific, but yes, it's an opportunity that Lakeshore presented to the town. I mean, the town has been, Patrick's office had been in discussions with Lakeshore for a while now about ways to possibly, partner.
Mhm.
And that kind of developed with, I guess, Lakeshore, was looking to sell the facility and came to the town and said, would you be interested in purchasing it?
So how does it work that Lakeshore is technically in Broomfield and all the tax revenue would go to Broomfield?
Well, no, so there's, the town would be exempt from property tax.
What about,
And
what
so-
about gains on members?
It would only be anything that I guess is sales tax, correct? Which would be fairly
Membership?
limited. Membership's not
There's no sales tax membership?
It would be any retail goods that were sold. So if they were selling, you know, workout clothes or whatever you might sell, like at the front desk.
Personal
which
trainer doesn't
Lakeshore
tax?
does now, but I would think that under town ownership, we probably wouldn't be selling much of anything.
What, personal trainers?
If you had a subcontractor,
These things are too close together, I think is what it is.
That's why I'm trying to over there.
that's the problem, because I think we can't hear it, you can't hear the recordings,
Right.
which is, we're getting a lot of complaints about that.
Put it in the middle?
So if you go with one, yeah, so we can try putting one in the middle.
You want to turn that one on for you?
Yeah.
I hit the button.
So, yeah, I mean, the taxes would be relatively limited.
Okay, all right.
And then there's also been the question with, you know, kind of one, can the town own something in another municipality? Yes. I mean, that's actually fairly common with things like parks.
Right.
Denver owns parks outside of the county, and city of Denver, Boulder, city of Boulder owns parks outside of the city limits within the county. But no, I mean, we wouldn't be able to annex it
Right.
because it's in Broomfield County. It would take an act of the state Congress,
legislature.
the state legislature, to incorporate that into our town because of the county border. So that's not going to happen.
Boulder County border.
Right. Yeah. So, and a couple other questions I had, and I'm sorry for dominating this, because I've been thinking about this for a little bit. I'm a member of Lakeshore, and I want to see a rec center, and I used to be a member of Louisville, so I feel like at least I have a lot of experience, at least on my side. In fact, I just left Lakeshore just right now before I came here. It's up there somewhere. But, so is Lakeshore trying to, I'm assuming they're going to try to sell not just the facility, but the membership that goes with the facility, right? And by the way, as a member, I can tell you that there's a significant amount of upkeep that needs to happen, or not just upkeep, but
Maintenance.
there you go, maintenance that's been neglected
Yeah.
that would have to happen. So when you factor in all the cost of them also, I believe, wanting to sell the membership, how does that compare, just high level order of magnitude, to building a new facility?
Well, so right now, staff is basically saying any prepaid membership is going to carry over, would carry over. And then, you know, as those expire, I guess they would have to be renewing membership under the town.
I mean,
Um,
does Lakeshore want to sell the existing membership as well with the
I
facility?
mean, they're selling the business essentially. So, yeah.
Okay.
That is my understanding. It's, you know, it's the building and the land and its contents.
Right, okay.
Which include essentially whatever contracts exist, and then the town's gonna have to look at whether, you know, how to renew stuff like that. But I think memberships, that would carry over. And then deferred maintenance, staff is working on that, you know, to look at, you know, both what the cost is gonna be as far as, you know, potential renovations, like
Right.
like initially when the town
There's
purchased
birds
it,
living in the walls.
as well as.
Literally, there's birds
Well,
living in the walls.
yeah, I mean, any big facility, go in a Home Depot or something, any big
Costco.
facility like that, you get a bird inside.
Birds made holes in the stucco living in there.
Yeah.
Woodpecker problem.
But yeah, so, and then staff's gonna be working on what the
Okay.
ongoing annual operations and maintenance cost is gonna.
So the, kind of the quick upshot, because I think probably you guys may have a lot of the same questions, and so, board has tasked us within a 6-week time frame. We're about halfway through it, to figure out if it's, you know, if we want to continue and eventually negotiate with these guys to purchase it, or in 3 more weeks, do we want to say, you know, this isn't right for us? So right now, we've got we've already had one engineer look at the building. The board has requested that we have 2 more, so we'll have 3 independent engineering reports. Structural, so two additional reports on structure. We'll bring in a soils engineer to look at the ground. We'll also have a report for the inside aesthetics. So we've mentioned this to the board before, and we'll figure what the other 2 engineers say, but what they're telling us now is it's slab on grade, which was designed to float with the soils underneath. So the building itself is structurally fine. They haven't done a decent job keeping up on the inside aesthetics, which I think is an issue, right? So we're working on identifying what those are and then a price. We're also looking at the existing membership and the incoming revenue and trying to pair that with maybe something more along the lines of our recreation memberships, trying to take existing membership and run those numbers against, let's say, a Louisville or a City of Boulder, then trying to determine a baseline for, okay, what would that look like? Is the board gonna, would we need to go out for a tax increase?
Right.
How would we make up the subsidy? So it's our understanding, the guy who owns the building in Chicago he owns a handful of properties. He's just looking to sell. We haven't been given any answer on what happens if the town doesn't buy it or if there's another purchaser out there. So the board has also asked that we put together an FAQ sheet and actually everything you brought up was on there. So we're at about 27 questions. The board will see those questions on Monday night, as well as the draft responses that we've come up with. And then they'll take a look at some fees comparisons that we've pulled from all the surrounding jurisdictions. And then, maybe we've also talked about a public engagement process, which the board was interested in, at least one opportunity here and one opportunity at Lakeshore. There's been some concern about just holding them at Lakeshore, in that you're also now going to hear from people who aren't town residents. So I think maybe we're looking now at 2 opportunities here and 1 at Lakeshore, because we've also started, we know that existing members have lots of questions too, but they may not be in town, so we want to make sure that town residents have a good opportunity to comment. And I'm trying to think.
Have we looked at, I did, kind of did a quick assessment, being in that facility all the time, of comparing that to what we said the amenities that we needed in a rec center. And it seems like it meets almost all the needs. I can't think of anything off the top of my head maybe that it doesn't, because some of the space could even be, it's used for something now, but it could probably be reused for something else.
Yes, so
You guys have had these discussions?
Yeah, so what I basically told the board when we met with them was, from the list that we developed last month of what we thought needs to be in the facility, the primary ones that it's lacking are the jog walk track,
right,
which staff is saying is a potential renovation item that could be added, like above the gymnasium in Lakeshore. The pool facility is really that big question mark, because right now it's essentially a lap pool with a therapy pool. We were saying
the indoor pool.
Yeah, the indoor pool.
Okay, because there's an outdoor too.
So we were saying that we would like to see a indoor competitive pool and leisure pool, and because that building, the footprint of that building is pretty much established. There's not a lot of room to expand that building. It would be difficult to get a much of a indoor leisure pool. The flip side is, yes, we would get an additional outdoor pool, which has the slides and everything. We also pick up 2 additional outdoor tennis courts as part of this. Neither of which we were discussing for an indoor facility. We weren't talking about any outdoor amenities for a new facility. And then the third would be, we were talking about senior center. And so right now that obviously is not there, but there are some spaces in Lakeshore that could be repurposed. And there are some, you could do some things potentially, like on the Kid Shore side, you could maybe do a second-story addition
Right.
over like the preschool area and stuff like that. So there is some potential to pick up some of that community space by working with the existing building. The pool is really that one, that iffy one.
Is there any opportunity to do something with the outdoor pool to cover, if you're gonna be working in buildings, I guess you're doing that too. Sorry.
I mean,
This goes back to the north.
staff is saying, there's lots
If
of
you're already
things.
redoing the facility.
There's lots of things that you can do to, renovate, repurpose the pool area. Cost is gonna be the object.
Right.
I mean, sure, you can do anything if you have an unlimited checkbook.
Just depends on how much you get the facility for.
Yeah. So, but as far as building new, we never finished adding up what we were really talking about last month as to what that would cost new. Talking to Patrick, we're probably talking more like 30 to 40 million for the facility we were talking about last month. I mean, right now in this FAQs that the town's working on, the number they're floating in there is like 15 to 20 million.
Oh, geez.
It seems low.
Seems way low.
So that's something that I think we will, want to discuss with the board, is be accurate in talking about a new facility in this process to the public, because we don't want people to think that we could build Lakeshore for a new Lakeshore somewhere else, like
Right.
the Richmond property, for $15 to $20 million. That's not going to happen. I mean, Ron, you were saying what you thought Lakeshore cost 15 years
The
ago.
original purchase of it, when they bought it, when they built it in 2001, I've heard numbers, it was close to 60 to build that huge thing.
It's probably not right.
Oh,
That
I
was-
don't doubt that.
Well,
It's easily 60.
think about it, we were looking at,
60.
the facility we were looking at was 60,000 square feet,
Right.
and at $500 a square foot, that's 30 million.
Just a-
So, and Lakeshore is like 130,000 square feet.
Kind of a quick reference
Double.
point is you can look, Louisville's expanding by 50,000 square feet for 28 million.
And it says about double that, a little over double that, so
And I think, to kind of Peter's point
That's
earlier, the
expanding
list,
on.
I know.
the list that you guys came up with on March 15th, if we're just using the old Barker Rink or CCAT numbers, with the amenities that you guys had suggested, which was, building support space, facility administration space, senior adult lounge, child watch, wet classroom / party room, middle school gym, weight room fitness, 40-person aerobic room, jog walk track, large climbing wall, 20-yard competitive / leisure pool, aquatic support space, and a cafe. And then you guys had in there 160-person community room, explore the cost before officially including it, and a full wood basketball court to explore the cost. I want to say that facility was, and those were 2013 numbers, like at $42 million.
I mean, it's just from the first blush of this, to cut to the chase, from my opinion, is, it seems like we can get at least 85% of what we had on that list, maybe more, for half the cost. I would think it would be almost silly not to recommend this.
I'm having it right away versus
That's
waiting,
4 or 5
build it,
years,
and-
right, that's the other point. And if we were to purchase Lakeshore, that then frees up the Richmond property potentially to do more with, as far as park space.
Right.
Fields, courts, whatever. Whereas if we built an indoor facility there, we essentially have nowhere else left in town for fields, or courts, or whatever, the bigger amenities that's always been kind of at the top of our amenities priority list. So that's something else to think about. We could probably purchase Lakeshore, renovate it, and build out Richmond for half what it would cost to build something new. I mean, the board's gonna have to, negotiate the purchase price of
Right.
Lakeshore.
I'll just
We're
say,
just making a
from a town planning aspect, the Richmond 15 is ideal because it's kind of north to south, kind of in the middle of, Rock Creek, and it's not too far from, original town. Lakeshore is still fairly convenient in that north to south direction, but it is a little further east, and an easy access from 36, right next to the side of the mall there to it. So there's still easy access, and so from a location-wise, the biggest hiccup that most people have is it's right outside of the Superior town limit.
Well, and it's the furthest location you could get from like where we're sitting right now, original town.
Yep.
It's Sagamore.
Right.
And then, potentially the town center residents, But, even once, if town center's built out, at the 1,400 units that they've been talking about, and then you add in, Coal Creek Crossing, Original Town, Sagamore, you're still talking about less residents than Rock Creek. So the majority of the Superior residents would still be in close proximity to Lakeshore. It's just not as convenient as the corner of Colton and Castle.
But
But
from
it's
a
still more
price
convenient than Louisville.
Yeah.
Right, it's still more convenient than Louisville or any other municipal rec center that we could potentially go to, Boulder, Broomfield.
And I think the other key is that, most Superior residents either go to Lakeshore or Louisville. And if we could bring them back to Louisville, to Superior and away from Louisville, and half of the membership already at Lakeshore is Superior residents, I mean, you're just adding the Superior element to it, and you're not creating another competitive piece in the market. So I think that's, if we could purchase it and add it to the town's amenities, I think it'd be a good thing.
When I bought my house, I really wanted a third car garage. But I didn't want to spend $700,000 for that third car garage, so I settled.
Exactly. Exactly.
I only have a two-car garage.
And I think that's the key is like there's this opportunity that we're either going to grab the opportunity or it's going to go by, and 15 years from now, they'll still be talking about that rec center.
Right.
Is what it just seems like it's been in all the master plans and everything for so many years that it's never moved forward.
Yeah, I think the advantages are time, because it's relatively quick, I think, if everything works out. And cost, it's very roughly half-ish.
Yeah.
The one little, I think the location, so the Richmond property is probably a slightly better location, more central, but that's still 2 out of 3. And I think the money aspect and the speed aspect kind of make up for that. So
We're all kind of saying, does anybody have a dissenting opinion?
Well,
It's all going to come down to the money.
Well, that's out of our hands, right?
well, and so I think that's really what I really see our options are. We make a recommendation that's very specific as far as Lakeshore. Like we basically say, yes, the board should purchase Lakeshore, no, the board should not purchase Lakeshore. Or we just be more general and say something along the lines as PROSTAC recommends that the town pursue a rec center in any shape or form. Something very general of basically like, we just endorse the idea of a rec center. Whether it's new or Lakeshore, we don't care, we just favor a rec center. Or we don't favor a rec center. I mean, so we can be very specific or very general.
So
I guess I
I like
don't,
the choices.
I don't see how we have enough data for the first one that you mentioned if we don't have the cost information. I
Right.
mean, maybe we could straddle that a little bit and say we're in favor of the ongoing negotiations and support that idea. rather than-
The one thing I will say is largely PROSAC's not asked to consider cost. So yes, there's still a lot of questions regarding Lakeshore, but we can make a recommendation just purely based on, what we see as the need and independent of any cost.
Right.
But we could kind of caveat this. We could say that PROSAC is in favor of any is in favor of developing or doing something with any rec center, including the current, ongoing efforts of working with Lakeshore.
Right.
Just kind of put that as a caveat, including that effort that's going on. So we can say, yes, we're always in favor of a rec center, but we're also kind of in favor of you guys continue this dialogue that you're having.
I think just from the basis, because I think there was a draft analysis that the Lakeshore facility met, I forget the exact number, but around 85% of the needs that were identified in the surveys. Is that true? Or, no, excuse me, the needs that we
Identified.
selected. Right, exactly.
Yeah.
That-
So from our
Mhm.
2 meetings ago, or a meeting ago, whatever it was, when we did the analysis, yeah, like 80% or 85% of.
I
what
told
we
the board
proposed.
80%.
Right.
That wasn't a mathematical.
Right, right,
calculation.
so-
That was a general, and, you know,
Right.
and Corbett just said 85.
I
you
just
know.
did a rounding
So,
error.
so
Okay.
yeah, I mean,
Right.
we were both kind of saying the same thing.
So it meant the-
without actually like writing down how many amenities.
It beats
it
the
had.
majority of the amenities that we
Exactly, that's
identified
the-
as a group. So
Yeah.
I think
the
that's
point
that's
we
a
were trying
plus.
to make, yeah.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
buying a used house versus building your own house, like you were
Right.
saying.
And then you
Close
say,
enough.
and we feel that with the facility that's there, there's renovations that could accommodate up to all of our requested amenities for a rec center,
Yeah.
Yeah.
potentially.
Yeah,
I mean, there's
most,
some-
yeah, potentially.
there's some
we could have
financials
most, if
and-
not all.
Because I think
You know.
that's where our value comes in, right, is saying, yes, there's, the community has identified a need, and we
Right.
looked at it, and it seems like a good option to us.
So does anyone want to make a recommendation?
Well, before we go, the only thing I would request, Patrick, you said you guys are about 3 weeks out in
Yeah,
your
the board,
process?
board said 6 weeks, and we're about halfway through.
And what is as far as when you say you're 3 weeks out, from giving them a presentation, behind the scenes presentation, is it going to be at a board meeting presentation?
My guess is it'll be at a board meeting, but they said they wanted roughly 6 weeks
Right.
to issue a letter of intent to negotiate or not. So my guess is that'll happen in a board meeting. We are going to present some initial information on Monday, so I'd have to look ahead, but I'm guessing what's that?
So
What's
based
in
upon
May?
that
It's probably the
information-
second meeting in May. I
Right.
think the second meeting in May, I'm guessing we'll have a pretty healthy presentation.
So based upon that, we got to go with the generic, in my opinion. Some form of a generic supporting of the concept of any rec center, but I wouldn't even mention Lakeshore. So, that'd be just because of the fact that they're already working on it, let's figure out what they come back with, and then at the next meeting, which you're going to have most of the presentation, you may even be able to give it to us before you go to the board with it in May. So we might even be able to put together a more detailed support or whatever you guys.
And I think we'll hear, I'm not exactly sure, what kickstarted us presenting on Monday, but I'm sure we'll get some information from the board on Monday as well.
Did the board ask us to consider this after this meeting? Or, what? I guess if we're going to wait to the next meeting to even address Lakeshore, then making a recommendation now, is that premature? Or why are we doing it right now if we're going to have data in a month?
Well-
I think I know the premise is that we know that they're doing this effort, and we kind of want to say that we're in favor of it, right?
It's because the reason why it was put on the agenda tonight is because even though the board hasn't specifically asked us yet, I feel that at some point they are going to ask the opinion of PROSTAC. So since we had gone pretty far down the road
Right.
at looking at a new facility, it would hold some value for the board to hear our opinion on Lakeshore.
And I think the other thing is, ever since the, kind of our agenda for the year has been to analyze the indoor needs and recreation
Mhm.
requirements and what we feel that we could put forth in a ballot measure or something later in the year. And then this we were going through the amenities and saying this is what we want at a rec center, and then this opportunity came up, and it's like, well, do we continue down here's what the pieces we want and don't want? Or do we say, we kind of have a rough understanding, but does this new opportunity meet all those needs, and do we want to put forth something? Because the board wants to make a decision
Right.
within 3 more weeks, so that'll be before our next.
Have we presented
Meeting.
our, the amenities list that we came up with the last thing to the board? Did they
Well,
have
it
that
was-
recommended list?
Yeah, it was in the meeting notes that
Okay.
would have been in their
All
packet
right.
at the
And I
last
think
board
you,
meeting.
during the dinner,
Yeah, we
And,
ran
yeah,
through
right,
this.
we reviewed it when we met
the
with
special
them.
session.
regarding Lake Shore. It was
Lake
reported.
So when we presented that, we didn't say that we recommended pursuing a
Nope.
rec center, we just said, we recommend these amenities if there's a rec center?
Well, that was the special session that no one knew about what we were talking about until we showed up 2 hours beforehand.
Okay.
It was the
And-
special, and then it was made public at that meeting.
Focus was Lake Shore, though.
Yeah.
And the focus was
And
all
the-
Lake Shore.
The board members did ask what our opinion was, but those were individual opinions of those of us who were sitting there, because we hadn't
We
not
hadn't
discussed
discussed
it
it
as a
like this.
committee. So this is our first opportunity as a committee to discuss it.
So at that time, the recommendation, it was in the notes, committee reviewed a comprehensive amenity list previously presented by Barker and your CCAT throughout 2013-14 when the board of PROSTAC first showed interest in discussing a future facility. At the conclusion of the exercise, the group unanimously agreed that the following amenities should be included in the future recreation center. That was that list I went through. So there's been a recommendation that whatever that next step was going to be, that we at least were looking at these
Okay.
amenities.
And then, the recommendation, are we saying that not just pursue a rec center, but pursue a rec center this year?
Well, I would say something along the lines of,
You know, because like when we present our 5 years trails list, we say, we want them to even look at it this year or, you know, some other time, so.
yeah, I mean, if we're gonna be more general, I would say something along the lines of, you know, PROSTAC recommends that the board strongly pursue a recreation center in any shape or form, you know, as soon as possible to meet the needs of the community. You know, something that would be a very general recommendation, not actually putting any mention of Lake Shore. You know, kind of Ron said, if we don't want to put any mention of Lake Shore in it, that would kind of cover our bases of, you know, read between the lines. This could mean Lake Shore, this could mean a new facility, but we're strongly recommending that you do something regarding a recreation center.
Why don't we want to voice our opinion about Lake Shore? I mean,
Well, that's
I
the
understand that
finances
we.
aside.
Yeah, I mean,
That's really the,
exactly. I mean, that is the biggest point for us to decide is, do we mention Lake Shore or not, based on the fact that we don't have any detailed information on Lake Shore. We
Well, but
only
it's-
have the general idea that the town can purchase it. A lot of these questions that Patrick reviewed, the kind of bigger points of, you know, structural concerns, maintenance concerns, ultimately cost, though again, we should really concern ourselves with that specifically. But these big questions that have been discussed by the public through the Facebook groups, through the CAC list, they are still unanswered at this point.
Just to quickly mention, I think another big item is the potential membership fees for Lake Shore versus build our
Right.
own. But I think that's something that the staff is looking into to try to figure out a rough guess on
I mean,
what that might look like, because that's like the first question.
That one more or less is answered in the sense
Uh.
that staff is basically saying that the goal is to keep those in line with other municipal recreation
Yeah, the
centers.
direction that staff's been working under is trying to bring the fees in line with, you know, a Louisville or a Bolton.
Okay. Okay.
And figuring out how that kind of balances out financially, and I think then from that, you can determine, you know, what the town would need to do, maybe go to a vote or issue debt or whatever it would be to then cover the shortfall, because if, you know, in Corbett's case, or what we're hearing, you know, an individual's $92 a month, so you also have to take that $92 a month down to $35 a month. You know, that gap is what the town's gonna have to make up in terms of a subsidy.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, thank you.
So in
But
my
that's if they
opinion-
continue to operate the same way.
Right.
Right. I mean,
As,
there's-
you know, so I think you can't make a straight apples to
Right.
apples
right, so that's.
comparison
you know, that's
because they
ultimately-
operate differently than the town might
They
operate.
try to operate as a luxury type
Right, the town's
using their
gonna,
quotes.
the town's obviously gonna try to reduce costs, operating costs, as well as the town's not gonna need to make a profit.
Right.
So right now, you would assume the goal of Lakeshore by charging the rates they're charging is to make a profit. Whether or not they're making that profit, you know, we've heard from people in the community say they're not, but, you know, we don't know that for certain. Town staff might know a little bit more because they've seen the financials, but that's not going to be the goal of the town. So that would therefore eliminate some of that difference that Patrick's talking about between the current rates and potentially the new rates under the town ownership. Some of that just disappears because it's profit margin.
So I guess what's going through my head is two things about wanting to mention Lakeshore in that recommendation is, one, to get it's kind of, I guess they're combined, really to get the message across that, you know, we think that the rec center is an absolute need and we're willing to sacrifice an amenity or two, or, you know, to get something sooner rather than have everything and wait. And two, we think that they're, you know, and that it's a really good opportunity that we're willing to sacrifice if we can get it at a really good cost. And we don't care what the cost is overall, but we think that it would be a, you know, it's going to be a lower cost, maybe sacrificing a little bit than waiting 5 years or however long, 10 years it's going to take, and spending a lot more money. That's kind of the gist of the message, I think, that we would try to get across to them. Not to say that, you know, I don't care if Lakeshore, I really don't care if it's Lakeshore or another Lakeshore that's right next to Lakeshore. I don't care about that. It's the fact that, you know, we're willing to sacrifice. We think it's worth sacrificing a little bit on that amenities list if we can get something sooner, because we think it's that high of a priority. That's the kind of the message I would like to send. And how do we send that?
Yeah, I was going to say that as a trustee, I'm really going to want to, if you just send something generic, that's going to say to me that you guys don't really have an opinion.
Right.
And so, and I know you do have an opinion because I've been sitting with you for 4 years. So my comment would be is, you know, maybe make a general overarching, we believe we need to move as quickly as possible on a recreation center. And then maybe put some sub-notes under it that says things like, you know, we believe that timing is critical, and we think Lakeshore meets 80%. So don't feel like you have to make it succinct, but give us the information so that we really have a sense of what you're thinking. I have a sense of what you're thinking, but the rest of the board is not. And so I really think they're listening to you. And if you feel strongly about this one way or the other, even with the caveats, you know, you can say, hey, we realize it may be out of cost, but based on the information we have available to us right now, we feel these things.
Right.
And that's just, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but I think the more information you give us, the better it is.
And we could say that without mentioning Lakeshore. I mean, we could say something to the effect that we, you know, as Peter said, we recommend pursuing a rec center, you know, for the town, including, we just say we recommend pursuing a rec center as soon as possible to meet the needs of the community, and that if there's an existing facility that meets most of the needs, that's worth pursuing. To have the facility sooner rather than later. And you don't even have to mention Lakeshore, but the gist is you're kind of, you know, telling them, even look at that one.
So I've been trying to kind of, as you guys are talking, jot down the gist of the conversation. So I've got the members of the committee present support an expedited process to obtain and/or build an indoor recreation center that houses the majority of the amenities identified by the committee during their meeting on March 15th. These amenities have been selected based on input from the public through community engagement meetings, as well as the 2014 indoor space survey. So that's kind of at least the gist of what I'm hearing you guys say. I mean, separate from the amenities being selected.
So the only question then would be, do we want to add a sentence at the end that says something along the lines of, you know, any opportunity to, you know, obtain these amenities?
Build or obtain, I was going to say.
Yeah, you know, in the shortest period of time possible is strongly encouraged
Right, I like that.
by this
Yeah.
committee.
I keep coming across with emphatically support what the town board's been doing for the last month.
Just to familiarize myself to the process, what's the downside of saying, let's go with Lake
My only
Shore?
hesitation with including Lake Shore is if 3 weeks from now, they come back and say it's a dead deal, we're not gonna have it. We sat here for 2 years and waited for town center to be built, because we might have something in there to do, so we kind of put the whole discussion about indoor space on hold. So
Right.
my concern, that's the only reason I brought it up as a concern, if you specifically mention Lake Shore, and the town comes back and says, you guys should, this is the dumbest idea ever. You know, I went to buy a long time ago, I went to buy a liquor store in Boulder, and my accountant looked at me and goes, you're an idiot, you should buy this. So if we get something back from them saying this would be not in the best interest of the town, we're not attaching our recommendation to Lake Shore, we're attaching it to the what I'm seeing,
Right.
what I see
I
the
like
board,
that number.
what I see what the board doing is good. It's, we want to emphatically support the motion, that the movement, not the motion, the movement that they're making, having staff pursue Lake Shore. And I would like to see part of that, you know, those are the 2 words that come to mind to me, is emphatically support what
Yeah,
they're
that
doing
makes
right
sense.
now.
Right, so we can
Right,
add that,
because-
emphatically support with the board's current efforts in, you know,
In meeting
in
our-
meeting town
kind
needs
of what you
through
just
pursuing
said.
a thing such as a rec center as soon as practical.
Because
Indoor space, doesn't even have to be rec,
Well,
indoor space, yeah.
one thing I personally hope happens out of this whole process is if the board ultimately says no to purchasing Lake Shore, they also make a firm decision on whether or not to pursue a ballot initiative for a new rec center.
Yeah.
I hope that by answering the Lake Shore question, they don't leave us hanging on the general idea of a rec center. They pretty much come forward and say no on Lake Shore, yes on a new recreation center, or they just be definitive and they say no and no.
But
We're not interested in any rec center at this point. Let's be done with this for, you know, another couple years.
Space
or
over
whatever.
in Colton and,
Yeah.
and-
But that's personally what I hope happens out of this whole process is they do answer the question of does the town pursue something new
Right.
if we're not going to pursue Lake Shore?
And I think that if they come back and say no, depends on how they say it, we might want at that point to make a recommendation then saying, all right, you said no on Lake Shore, but you didn't say no on the rec center. We recommend that you put a ballot initiative.
Right.
Because
Right, yeah.
we're unified at that point,
And
and let's keep moving forward.
Even if the
Right, because
board says
that
no-
is the
That's the next topic.
that is the train track that we were
And all
on. I
the-
mean,
right.
we were headed towards that
Right.
before this Lake Shore
Which was
thing.
the direction we got from the dinner with them.
Yeah.
Right, because that's the feedback we've been hearing for years from the community about providing a rec center and indoor space. So, yeah.
Okay.
So is it just enough that we're catching the notes, or do we need to make a
Well, no, we should make an
You need a
actual
recommendation,
recommendation.
but-
So,
All right, so and then,
Patrick's been typing
so I
away
want
there,
to,
so.
I think, Ron, you hit on some good stuff, all right, and then we can start to wordsmith, however. So I was moving my emphatics around. All right, the members of the committee present support an expedited process to obtain and/or build an indoor recreation center that houses the majority of amenities identified by the committee during their meeting on March 15th. The committee also emphatically supports the board's current efforts to explore the feasibility of purchasing Lakeshore Athletic Club as an option to fill the indoor space need within town.
I like it.
Do we want Lakeshore in there? That's my only, I threw it in, but I kind of missed the end of
Well,
the combination.
what we're saying is we support their efforts. We're not necessarily saying, you know,
We don't know enough facts
Well,
on Lake Shore.
we should put the effort, but yeah, we still need the facts.
So, and then we
Direction.
put feasibility, I don't remember,
Yeah.
Ron, did that came,
Yeah.
somebody's mentioned feasibility. I think that leaves
Emphatic
it.
feasibility.
You at least support the process that we're
Yes.
going through now.
Right.
Because I do want, if the group wasn't good with it, this is the time to make that known. You know, I think that, which, if there are people out there, which I'm sure you guys have heard from, you know, before this gets full bore, if the committee was against it, now would be the time, you know, to say, because it may come up Monday. You know, who knows? I'm not actually sure what Monday's going to be all about, but it may even come up Monday. So this would be a good recommendation, because, you know, we could even get this into the packet, or at least, are you going to be there Monday night?
I will try.
Yeah. If not, you
So
know,
a little
you're
bit.
I
out
can't
Monday.
make it.
I'll be in Boston.
I'll be in Portland.
Jet setter.
It's just
We're gonna be
it's
in
just a matter of
opposite
how
sides,
late I want to keep
I'll be in
the daughter
Superior.
awake.
I just flew in last
I
night.
don't know. I don't know. I think this was one of the
My wife's
things.
like,
It was on the, it's on the agenda from like
I'll be at-
8:30
I'll be
to
at MIT.
9:30 or something.
Out of Other than the consent agenda, it's the only thing on the agenda.
Yeah.
I'll
So-
probably be at the meeting, so I can take notes.
I mean, presentations, but.
So-
And if there's any
I
opportunity
will-
to talk.
Real item.
Yeah.
I will make a
Convey the
motion
consensus.
of the language that Patrick read.
I'll second that.
Discussion?
I just don't like the Lakeshore part of it, but
I'm fine with it.
I'm fine with it.
All right. All in favor?
I'll vote for it because I still like the concept. I just don't like the language. I'm not gonna say no because it's rules.
Sorry.
I just think it pins us to Lakeshore, and if it doesn't go through, as you said, now we're gonna force the hand and say, what do we do next? So, I like the direction they're going, I just don't think Lakeshore is.
I think the way
The
you worded it,
definitive
I think the way you worded it was, we didn't say that
Right.
we want Lakeshore, that
It was-
We're supporting
we're
the
supporting
efforts to
efforts that
pursue
such
it.
as Lakeshore.
Yeah.
You know, it's just an
I
example.
can live with it.
It was, because it was the second sentence, so we're basically saying we
First
support
sentence is
the idea of a
required
rec
to
center,
fulfill.
including the possibility of
Yes.
purchasing Lakeshore. It's not like a definitive Lakeshore or
I think
nothing.
the first statement is acquire or build.
Yes.
And we support
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
pursuit
yeah.
of
Well,
Lakeshore.
Of obtaining
So
or.
that second one was the committee also emphatically supports the board's current efforts to explore the feasibility of purchasing Lakeshore Athletic Club as an option to fill the indoor space needs of the community.
Sounds good.
Just exploring.
Yeah?
Okay.
Can I ask you a
Sure.
quick question?
No, it's not allowed.
Because I'm very surprised that there's no one here today, and everyone that I have tried to ask, no one seems to be interested at all in, either in favor or against, or, I mean, most
There-
people in the community have heard about Lakeshore, and
I think a lot of
So-
people are interested.
Yeah.
They
If Lakeshore
just
had dogs,
are busy or. I don't
So there
know.
was,
Yeah, but I
if
mean,
you
you
followed,
maybe-
it, so when
Yeah.
this first came out, which was basically
The same day as.
April 4th, I guess, because
Meeting.
we met on April 3rd, right? So basically came out April 4th. There was a lot of conversation on the CAC, which is the email listserv for the town. There were at least like 3 threads on the Facebook groups that cover Superior
The 027.
8007. As well as that Friday, which would have been April 7th, is when the trustees had the like coffee chat with the town. I mean, there were
You went to the
easily
coffee
20 people there.
Okay.
And it was like a 2-hour discussion almost exclusively on Lakeshore. And so there was a lot of interest. It lasted probably a week, maybe 10 days, and then it died off. No one showed up at the board meeting this past Monday. That was this Monday, right? Or was it last Monday? Last Monday. No one showed up at the board meeting last Monday for public comment. No one showed up here for public comment. I'm sure that once the town announces public engagement meetings, it'll renew some of that interest back up. Hopefully, staff will be able to answer the majority of the questions that, again, have been posed that are being compiled in this FAQs, which will be presented to the board
Well, and also,
on Monday night.
it wasn't on the meeting agenda for the town board to discuss last Monday.
No,
It
it
will be on
wasn't.
the agenda this
It will be,
week.
right.
So it's publicly acknowledged that it's going to be discussed. So there may be
There
more
may be
people showing
more
up on Monday.
public comment.
Our agenda doesn't go out.
Yeah. But
I mean, I was thinking, I don't know.
this
oh
is,
my God.
this is
Wow.
someone said, welcome to Superior. This is the general issue in this town. Overall with public engagement is a lot of times people don't get involved until it's too late. Like something gets approved, they start moving bulldozers at the park and people are like, hey, I want this in the park. We've been talking about this park for 5 years.
Yep.
And yet, we didn't have clearly the amount of involvement that you would have thought when you actually hear the people chime in after the fact. The same thing happened in Town
I
Center.
talked to,
I had 17 people at my house on Easter, and every one of them knows I'm on PROSTAC, and every one of them asked me, and I said, well, I know about as much as you did because I wasn't involved in that. And every one of them basically said the same thing. I'll believe it when I believe it. So they kind of poo-pooed the idea, even though it came out. So that's the general consensus.
The threads on Facebook, I think I was kind of keeping an eye on the chit chat there. It was mostly positive.
Yeah, so
It's not scientific, but
Right.
So there were one, so that's 5, so 133 current posts on Facebook. 101 have leaned positive, 5 neutral, 3 outright negative, 23 had questions. We have 19 individuals, unique individuals who have responded on the CAC, which has been overwhelmingly negative, which is kind of the tone of the CAC. We're not currently monitoring any of the next door sites, but we're trying to kind of get our heads wrapped around that. And I want to say, Sandy, that Matt mentioned there have been 70-some independent emails to the board, which are leaning slightly towards the positive. So it's,
Okay.
I think it's out there, but I think you're right. I mean, I think what we've heard even from the indoor space survey is we've been talking about this. And this is my
For like
8th
2
year
years,
with the
3
town.
years.
We've been talking about it at least the 8 years that I've been here. So there's a little bit of the, I think, just the fatigue of continuing to talk about it. So.
and I've talked to a lot of people that are even instructors or people that use Lakeshore, and they're just like, if it changes over, that's great and becomes a town amenity. But, if not, I'm just going to still be part of Lakeshore, and hopefully.
Well, but that's a big question that
Yeah.
I don't
I know,
know if
and-
Lakeshore is
and-
going to answer.
Exactly. Will it still be there?
Will it still be there at the town? And that's going to be a question for Lakeshore to answer, and they might not be willing to answer it.
Right.
But that's something that everyone that's thinking that, what Corey just said, well, the town doesn't buy it, I'll just keep going to Lakeshore. They need to be thinking of that as far as whether they want to throw support behind to the board of whether or not they like the idea of the town purchasing it. Is there's always that possibility that Lakeshore is not there if the town doesn't buy it. That's not a reason for the town to buy it. But I think that the public should weigh that in their mind of whether or not they want to support the purchase or not.
And a lot of people I've talked to have also said that I think it increased the town's capacity to run other programs and increase some of the capacity of the programs that the town already offers, like in some of the additional facilities and utilization. So there's lots out there.
Okay.
You just have to search for it.
So moving on to the 5-year trails plan. Thank you everyone for filling it out. We are not finalizing this. This is just the preliminary results from this committee. OSAC is going to do the same thing. We're going to do a combined list with OSAC and come back either next month or in June to try to look at what the finalized list looks like. But if you look at the column with the couple numbers in red, that's basically if you take the everyone's at the high gets a 1, a medium gets 2, a low gets 3. That means that basically whatever has the lowest score is at the top of the list and down. So if you want to know what the red is, all the red means is if there are 2 trails that were tied with a number, so like there's 2 that had 10, there's 3 that had 14. I just preliminarily went and said, well, of the ones that are the same score, which one really would be at the top of the list. So,
Oh,
right now, trail number 6 is at the top of the list. Really looking at it, Town Center Trail Connections, number 17, would out, even though they had the same numeric score. If you look at, like what people put as like your top 3 or your, happen in the next year, that would kind of edge. Yeah, Corey, thank you for following top 3 with the top 4, and not the names, but you can look at yourself on the list. If you put in like an X and not a top 3, that made it a little harder. Oops. It really should have been numbered 1, 2, 3.
Sorry about that.
Okay, I put the next two.
Yeah.
So is 1 higher than 3 in the top 3 system?
No, so the top 3 would be top 3. So 1 would be your
Oh.
top, 2 would be
Right,
2, and 3
prioritized.
would be your
Yeah.
third priority.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what, yeah.
Okay.
So all that really does is it helps, again, when we have these ties,
Mhm.
it helps really say, oh, well, we had a tie, but, that one had, appeared as, number 1 3 times or something. So that one kind of edges out the other one out.
Makes sense.
Plus, it kind of gives us an idea when we go forward with PROSTAC too, or with OSAC, what are really the top priorities of PROSTAC if we have those top 3s. They're basically just tiebreakers. But generally, if you look down the list, the trails that we had that got added to the expedited list last year for trail design, which are essentially trail connectors along McCaslin, those kind of fell, this year they kind of fell more in the middle. The top is really Town Center Connections, the Davidson Mesa Underpass, Coyote Ridge, some of the more open space stuff, being Coyote Ridge, the Single Tree, the Coal Creek. So that's fine. We'll see where OSAC will most likely favor some of those more open space ones too. They last year their priority was really Shan Shan Trailhead. That falls in the middle for us too, so we'll see how that shakes out when we combine.
And I think there's some caveats on here because some of these, like we said, are in process, but they're still not built yet. So they're on the priority list to be built, and they're being engineered and looking at to put them in.
Right, but that's why I try to make the point to everyone is that just because something is listed as as developer, there's like 2 of them that are on here as developer, the Coal Creek Crossing one, and the section that runs along Calmonte, along McCaslin. Even though those, are going to be built eventually because they're basically, the developers are bound to build them, doesn't mean we should necessarily knock its priority down, because we want to encourage, we continue to see it as a high priority, we want to encourage that, it be built sooner than later. So just because we had trail designs done last year on trails, they don't currently have funding to actually build them. So we want to, again, encourage the board of, this is still our highest priority, fund it. Because as we know from the process last year with the trail design, there are 2 trails in particular that were basically red flagged. And so they might not be built, but we want to know whether or not they are a priority. And those 2 trails are the section from the water treatment plant down McCaslin to High Plains Drive. So essentially the section, what's the number?
Number 9.
Number 9. So that one actually got pulled. That one actually got pulled out of the design process because there were too many concerns over the grading.
Right.
Not to say it can't be built. So if we still want to see it as a priority, we should list it as a priority. But most likely that's going to require retaining walls, probably a paved path rather than
Well, or the
soft
other,
surface. And then number 7 is the other one, that one that's going between the houses from
The new
McCaslin
Wildflower Park to
El Dorado K8. Yeah, so, so that one, again, has some drainage concerns, will probably have to be a paved path, potentially going to be expensive to build, but that doesn't mean that it won't be built. No one said that it can't be built. It's just that it might be impractical to build. But we want to, from this process, we just wanted to know whether it's a priority. That's really the gist, is it because the Davison, we know that there's complications with the connections to Davison Mesa underpass, and largely that is outside of Superior's control because it's not within our town limits. So Louisville and CDOT are going to have more say in that than us. But that doesn't mean that if it's our priority, we want to continue through this list telling the board, stay on top of this.
That seems like an important one, because there's a lot of people that bike there and that's
Right.
not good to cross Marshall.
And that one really comes down to like a safety issue.
Yeah.
Because yes, I mean, you can access it by riding the shoulder of the road right now, but which is fine for bikes, but not as good for pedestrians. But even when you're talking about bikes, right now there's if you're coming off of 76, and trying to get to the north side of Marshall, you're crossing a 45 mile per hour zone without any protection. There's no crosswalk, there's no traffic light, there's no underpass. So even on a bike, particularly at certain times of day because of sunlight, it's potentially dangerous.
Is there?
Just a quick clarification, there will be a trail from McCaslin up to the existing underpass. That's part of the Dr. Cog funded project.
Right.
But that actual crossing of Marshall, once you're at the underpass, so just so everybody's clear, we built the underpass here right under McCaslin. For those of you that have been around for a while, what we used to call the Star-to-Star Trail when we did the Dr. Cog grant. So that trail along Marshall Road will go and then stop at the current underpass. But you're right, the actual crossing of Marshall Road is a CDOT item because it's a state highway.
I have a question on the Dr. Cog, but that's supposed to be designed this year, correct?
Yeah.
What is your take on the potential of that trail? Because I drive by it and I'm looking at it.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
That's going to be
engineer.
I mean, there's not a lot of room. It's basically a drainage ditch. There's points where between like the fence and I think is there a guardrail part of it at Marshall? Between the guardrail and the fence that is on the 36, edge of 36, I mean, it's really narrow at points and with very poor grade.
I'm not quite sure how they're going to engineer that. I know that it also got really, really tight over here behind the liquor store, where you're literally at the highway.
Yeah. But that's complete,
2
right?
feet. That's complete over there. So yeah, I'll be curious to see the design as well, because I think we have some similar questions of, okay, how pedestrian friendly is that going to be, or is it going to look more like the 36 bikeway where, it's going to be right next to it with the guardrail? It's really close.
Yeah. So, I mean, unless anyone really has any comments on this, this is just the first crack at it. Jacques and Maria, if you want to come back to me with an actual 1, 2, 3 on
Sure.
yours,
Sorry about that.
I'll update it.
One thing I just want
You probably thought it was so simple.
to remind folks is that the Coyote Ridge maintenance, a lot of that was due to the 2013 floods. That's why it actually wasn't on the list a couple of years ago that got up to the list. because there was a lot of damage, erosion due to the floods, and this is to help fix all that. So it's not to create new trails.
Well, no, it's actually a
Well, a new-
combination,
the-
because
the
there is
social-
a new
there is-
trail
there are the social
on
trails.
there. What is it, 12?
Right, you're right.
Oh, this one way over
18.
there?
No,
It's
what's the 18? Okay.
But it's
18.
the social trails. It's
There's, well, yeah, so there's the leg that would take you from Pirate
Right.
Park into the Coyote Ridge Loop. But we were also saying, you know, if there's any real
That's- yeah.
big maintenance, not that like we did on the cleanup day, but
No,
any
no,
big maintenance
major
And-
that requires a little more engineering, that we potentially do that in conjunction with adding that new
That
leg.
ADA leg. yeah.
Right.
Which.
And then the new leg is to basically to bypass the current social trail to give them another option, right?
Instead of
Yeah,
going
well,
like
what
that,
it's
you go
really
like
doing,
that.
yeah, what it's really doing is creating a trail on town property that gets you into the Coyote Ridge Loop without going on the social trails that go on level 3 property to get you up there.
I just don't remember how much they were for those discussions that we had, so.
Yeah, I didn't remember that, so I didn't rank it very highly because I
So-
thought, oh, it's not that old, how bad could it be?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
and-
my thought process
and-
was kind of the same.
One comment on this is that trail, that number 18, is not going to be high cost to build. And in fact, a combination of volunteers or Boulder Youth Corps could build it this year.
Cool.
On a relatively low budget. So that's something that we're going to talk a little, next item here, volunteer opportunity. One of them is Coyote Ridge maintenance. Do we want to try to expedite that this year?
Well-
Kind of separate from the whole 5-year trails plan. Just say, look, we might be able to knock this one out quickly.
And I'll just say from last year's volunteer effort on the Coyote Ridge, there was a lot of effort put in there and a lot of trails cleaned up, but there's still more
Yeah,
out there
right.
to clean up. And, you know, it was a day and I think there was a lot of people.
Yeah, it was
a lot
only
of support.
3 or 4
I mean,
hours.
so yeah, you just knock it out. Yeah, it was like a morning
Yeah.
session.
I wouldn't
So-
take it off as high as it was ranked.
I wouldn't take it off, no. But that
No,
that is one that we could potentially take care of without really having to go through, you know, a real funding approval. I mean, it could be done largely on volunteer labor, essentially.
Including the flood damaged?
Some of that's. gonna be
Well,
set.
some of that might need to be addressed separately,
Okay.
but some of it we could address with volunteers probably as well. It just kind of
Just can't
depends
do
how
it.
extensive we want to,
Right.
you know, we want to do stuff. I mean, if we want to go in and put like a ton of water bars in, you're talking about a lot bigger job than you're going to knock out with volunteers in 3 or 4 hours. So that would take a little bit more effort. Again, probably not too high cost, but it's still going to take a little bit more planning than just like a volunteer day.
And so I have a question back to Patrick. 17, we continue to rank it high with the town center trail connections. And we really don't have much control over that because it is within town center development. But is there proposals that they will bring at some point of any connections, or is that just going to be up to us after the roadways and connectivities are in? And how do we continue that connectivity
Yeah,
throughout
there's
that
nothing
space?
right now. I think they're quite ways away from.
It's like as the FTPs
Well, that's what I
are
was-
filed
Yeah.
that involve
That's why I said my
those,
number
those
4.
Right, that's why I put it as a medium,
those boundary
because there's
areas.
nothing you do better right now.
That's
Yeah.
what I thought too.
Yeah, so it's really going to be as the FTPs come forward that are concerning those boundary areas, we're going to want to be keeping
Well,
an eye on.
and that's where, for me, it's like an outlook thing of saying, it's high on our list of,
We want
how do
it
you
on
get
there.
that connectivity
When?
between Old Town and Rock Creek and, you know, through that new town center space, and how do we make sure it's all woven together and not have, here's an island, here's an island,
Yeah.
here's an island. So, to me, I want to know how you get it all tied together.
Yeah, and that actually, when I was looking at ranking these, not knowing too much of the backstory and just kind of looking at the map, my thought process was to put priority on those trails that kind of lead into town center. So for example, the trails along McCaslin, for that reason, because I would imagine there would be more people
Right.
biking or even walking, whatever, jogging to town center. So it'd be
Right.
nice to have trails
connectivity.
or real, yeah, exactly.
So my thought on that was, I like it on the list, we keep it, on the list, that we keep it in our minds. But once the maturity is there, then, in my opinion, that's when it's going to jump to a higher priority. But right now, I think the maturity's not there to be
There's
such a high
nothing.
priority.
Mhm.
That was my thought
I
process.
mean, yeah, like for me personally, things like number 10, which is basically along the Rogers property at 21, the Shan Trailhead. I think, not that those aren't high priorities, but those are largely going to be defined in my mind with the Rogers property, Rogers Farm development. Because not only could they potentially get covered by developer, but we can't really set the alignment for some of that stuff right now until we know what the development is. Same with Town Center. It's a high priority, but we can't actually be talking about specific trails and alignments until those FTPs come forward. So.
Well, and I have a question for anyone that's new. Is there trails that you see that we're missing or something that we should add to the list?
We did ask that last one.
Did you?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, I'm ready for some more conversation.
Now they need a month to think about it now.
Yeah.
None offhand, I still have to explore most of them, so.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, thanks for the map. I'm gonna go look at them all now.
Right, yeah, exactly.
There's a lot there.
Yeah.
there
Oh,
is.
yeah.
There is. I mean, I'm not new to town, and I was actually surprised to see
Yeah.
some I didn't even recognize.
Right.
I've never been over there.
Yep.
So that's good.
It's
Yeah.
time to get the bike out.
I stick
Start
to the ones like
exploring.
close to my house, so.
Yeah.
And Coyote Ridge too.
See y'all?
Yeah.
All right, so later on, we're talking about items to discuss with OSAC leadership, but this is the primary one. So that's the next step on this 5-year trails plan, is to review with OSAC once they complete the same exercise that we just did. All right, so moving on to item number 5, volunteer opportunities. So the first one, so Coyote Ridge Trail maintenance. This would potentially be actually building that trail number 18, but we'll have to probably have some further discussion with staff on, how much time that would actually involve from volunteers. In the short term, I think what it basically would be is sometime maybe late May, early June, trying to organize another just general trail maintenance day like we had last fall, what Corey referred to earlier. We spent like 3 or 4 hours just doing some general cleanup, there's places where the original trail had gotten pretty wide. There was basically 2 tracks, so we tried to get it back down to 1. That seed that we planted to try to reclaim, none of that took, I don't think.
People walking.
So we might want to revisit if there's a better way for us to do that, those areas. I don't know if there's a way for us to till that ground up better, like have a rototiller or something, and try to one kind of make it a little more obvious to people that this is not supposed to be written on, but also 2, something to maybe try to get the seed to take better, because that's hard ground. I mean.
Yeah, so last year, I think I was up there walking maybe a week or so after it was installed or laid down.
Yeah.
But it was also after a big windstorm.
The hay was
So
all
a
gone.
lot of it, I actually, shoved some of it back into where it was supposed to be, but
Yeah.
a lot of it was just blown everywhere.
Yeah.
So maybe, I would recommend maybe looking into some type of netting system,
We
which
need
I do
to-
in my backyard, and that would also communicate, I think, not to step on it.
Yeah.
What did we
need
do
to-
after the fire? Because they put all that stuff down after the fire, man, that stuff really took off.
No,
And
that's nature.
After a fire, it comes back.
Well, let's
Right.
burn it.
Yeah.
Because so when
It
that
really
stuff,
took off like within
when
a
that
month.
stuff burns,
Yeah.
it drops seed, and so it actually grows back. So
And the
that's
ground
not
isn't
not
as-
The town put more stuff
spreading
down.
any seed.
The ground isn't as compressed.
It largely took
But it wasn't out in the open, it was just
Yeah.
along the trail.
Right along the path.
And John, to your point, you probably use So over at Wildflower Park, after the hillside's just washed out several times, you can actually get a seed blanket. It's that burlap looking material.
Mhm.
It's ugly for a year, but it will keep it in place.
Mhm.
Because you're right, I think any place in this town, I mean, it blows away.
Yeah.
Quite a bit. So I'll make a note of that.
So we could always prescribe burn it.
Yeah, but the trail soil
Very
is
anxious
just
to know
compressed,
what
it's
that is.
That'll
different.
keep people
It's
up.
much tougher to
There's a nice fire
grow.
burning boulder at this corner today,
I think the other thing is not just, I like the idea of doing something so that it doesn't blow away, but again, I see that all the time, and a lot of it also was that people just ignored it and
Yeah.
just walked over it.
Yeah, so
And-
we need to rethink a little bit how to better do that. But also, we only made it, we didn't really make it all the way around the loop.
Right.
So there's some areas, particularly like on kind of like the more southeastern portion of that
Up on the
trail
top.
loop, that we didn't really get to at all. So there's still some just general maintenance that we could certainly perform without getting into big improvements.
I would recommend that if we do the volunteer day again, is that last year, I remember distinctly that it was on the same day that the scouts went up to, what's that, Campatilla? So we missed,
it?
the entire scout community was heading up that morning to Campatilla, and we missed all of them.
Well,
In
yeah,
fact, I had to go up there too, so I didn't get to go.
Because Trustee Hansen had actually said that he would try to get the scouts to volunteer, and then,
We couldn't do it because, yeah, so.
well, I never heard the reason, but yeah, they didn't know.
Well, that's why I wasn't there, because I was with the scouts at Campatilla.
Okay, so that's definitely, the town has a new volunteer coordinator, so that's one thing, we'll, if he can reach out to some of the groups and both trying to make sure there's no conflicts, but also trying to get some of the bigger groups, because, last time there were a couple like high school kids that showed up, they were obviously getting some type of credit. But really it was, it was Sandy, Corey, myself, Darryl McCool, and just a few other, random residents. It was probably a dozen of us total.
Oh, I think there was more than that, because when we were out there, there was other kids, there was other families that showed
Well,
up here
right,
and
some
there,
of us
and
had
so-
kids
Yeah,
that were
kids
tagging
that-
along. I mean,
That counted.
they had a little fun. I don't know how useful they were. But
You laugh, but the high schoolers, most of them need some volunteer time. So
Right.
we-
Oh, yeah,
we
that's what
call
they- there were-
Monarch
that's
and
what they were
a couple
out
of
there
the
for.
there
schools.
were a couple that were there for credit. So if
Yeah.
if there's some way to tap in to get more
Yeah.
Well,
of them.
even last year, we list all volunteer opportunities at the high schools, and
Yeah.
you'd be surprised at how little they're actually interested.
Yeah.
But I think that our advisory committee kids are, the kids who showed up at Arbor Day are a great group. We always, all of our opportunities automatically go to Fairview and Monarchs.
There are a couple of specific needs, though. They have like honor society, they have to have a certain number of volunteer hours and things like that, so maybe the volunteer coordinator could reach out directly to some of those
Yeah.
contacts.
The only
Right, so we,
issue
that's
will
what I'm
be
saying,
is if
we
this.
do
Yeah.
honor
But-
society, it goes to the counseling office, honor society.
But I check
athletic
because
person.
sometimes the court, I don't know who it is, but there's a person in Monarch that sometimes they send a message and say, there's an opportunity here for you to volunteer, and sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
So
Well, we'll
I
continue to get
figure-
it out there, absolutely. We'll absolutely keep it out there.
Yeah, I mean, we'll need to figure out the timing because we're talking about the time frame that I just mentioned is the end of school, beginning of summer vacation. So
They
we'll,
don't need the volunteer.
yeah, so I don't know if maybe we could try to do it actually the weekend before Memorial Day, the weekend before school gets out, but then the kids.
Yeah, graduation.
Yeah, are gonna be-
Final,
Parties.
graduation.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So we'll need to kick that around a little, but I'll work with Patrick and try to get the volunteer coordinator involved and see if we can figure out a date. Maybe we have to go a little bit further into June and just contend with summer vacation, but we'll take a look at it. And then, so the second thing is Corbett. So have you communicated with
Mhm. With
Sunny
Sunny?
at, was it Velvestop?
Yep. I talked to Sonny.
So where do you think that stands, trying to get these
Sonny's
bike rides?
totally interested in it. The issue that he has is he can't really do mornings on Saturdays and Sundays because he leads other bike rides.
Okay.
So he'd be willing to do something in the afternoon, maybe not too late, but sometime later in the day, and do some of these rides. And he'd be willing to support. He'd be willing to support in the sense like one of the things we talked to is if we did a BMX thing, showcase not just the trails, the bike park, but how to ride them and what's appropriate, what's inappropriate. But he would also bring out his set of tools to work on people's bikes out there for them, just to kind of say, oh yeah, let's tune this up a little bit or here or there. He'd be willing to do that too. He said, and some of the other rides too. I thought, well, if you met in front of, if you're doing a little bit longer ride, you can meet in front of his shop, and that way, if somebody needed a tube or whatever, or if they needed help with something, he said he'd be willing to help out with that way too. And then at the end of it, we could go do coffee or something.
Yeah, and he was very much also interested in the volunteer day.
Yes, he was.
And then he was also very interested in any volunteer work or projects to take place over at the pump track. So that's another
So
opportunity.
I wonder if we wanted to do, because the three that we had mentioned was the 36 bike path, the bike track at Autry Park, and then Coyote Ridge. I wonder if we did some type of community ride at the bike track, if we couldn't coordinate that with the volunteer maintenance of the track. So say like, from 1 to 3 come out and do maintenance, and then from 3 to 5 come and ride it,
Yeah.
like something
Come
like
and
that.
ride it, and we'll have folks to talk about.
We had even briefly had a conversation of maybe trying to, if we wanted to add some features to the pump track, maybe the wooden kind of banked features or a
Right.
couple of
More some
rollers,
toys.
Right.
seeing if we get them sponsored
Few
or,
boulders.
if they're interested in doing some kind of donation or helping with the install. But we've gotten a handful of requests lately to do something different with that pump track. I think the people that use it have used it for a couple of years, and
Yeah, they're looking for
maybe
more.
there's an opportunity
Yeah, they want some
with the
new
expertise
features.
to do some new features. Or I know that through various storms, like that little kid side that was kind of a throw-in for us is pretty much gone.
Yeah.
You could.
Those bumps are pretty small.
I think there's actually a lot of opportunity. We get a lot of requests to do stuff on that pump track, so.
Yeah, so I mean, the last volunteer day was really just working on weeds, but,
Yeah.
could we not get some dirt out there to rebuild some of those?
Yeah.
Well, we took
Well,
dirt
it
from,
does jumps.
in the last two that
There's
I
a
was at.
pile.
There's dirt outside that we would bring it in to help fix areas, not to, to shore up some areas, but not to build.
But it really comes to someone's expertise of understanding how to build the track, because once we
Right.
realized how to build the roller, there was one person that knew how to do that, and I was like, oh, it kind of taught me.
Well, and I think that's maybe
You know,
where
that's-
Sonny's expertise, and then actually a local resident is now also part owner of that company, who's an engineer, who's expressed an interest in helping us with some of the design, or at least making sure that the rollers, or if we put a
How
bank
you
in,
do
that
it in.
that the
Yeah.
slopes are.
I'll tell you what will
Safe.
really help out is, one time specifically I was out there, there was a family there with a shovel on their own, and they were stealing from the hill that they were trying to build up. So they were taking from the sides of this hill and then putting on the top to try to build it up. And as the little kids were riding over it, because they were really trying to make it steep to really get a jump off it, and their little kids were like, whoa, this is too dangerous, like, well,
Yeah.
suck it up or get off of here.
Right.
But they were literally stealing from the hill that they were trying to build up. I'm like, do you not see the problem with that?
Yeah.
Again, it's the knowledge of just understanding how to build.
Right.
So,
It was
I guess the next steps here would be, Corbett, do you want to try to work
Yeah,
with Sonny
so
on some dates?
What I think we'll do is just, how about you, me, and Sonny, and we'll throw you on the email and just say, let's sit down and just kind of talk over some days, talk over, how the logistics of how this would really happen, and then start figuring it out, and we'll try to do that. Like I said, weekends are always good for me because I'm around, but they're bad for him because, so we'll try to do maybe, right before he closes one night, we'll try to do it and maybe go out there if you're willing.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll talk with Sonny and see what's a good time for him and then try to set something up.
Yeah, I've popped by just to shop a couple of times just to
Right.
keep the contact going. So he wants to be an advocate of he actually wants to attend meetings and get to know the group. So I
Yeah.
think he wants to make.
He's even trying to get involved in the Morgul
Yeah, I think he wants, obviously he's wanting to make that business survive.
Right.
And I think we're all interested in not seeing that, it's been a Baskin Robbins and it's been a this and it's been a that. And, I think he's really wanting to make an effort to connect with the community. So, it seems like a really good,
He's a really good guy.
guy.
Okay. So moving on to item number 6, facility reservations. So when I first put this on here, the idea was, whether this committee wants to make a recommendation to the board about programming the new pavilions that were put in at Wildflower Park and Purple Park. But Patrick clarified for me, you are accepting reservations for the pavilion at Wildflower Park, and you will be accepting reservations for the Purple Park Pavilion once the grass is grown in, there is planted some new sod around it. So this is really, I guess, more of a, just a general review, I guess, of if Patrick could just summarize for us what facilities can be reserved in town currently and which ones cannot. But I also want to have a little bit of discussion as to whether or not we want to make any recommendation to the board that the bigger, kind of more like annual events be rotated around more. So right now, like the movie night, the HOA movie nights are always at Community Park. The 4th of July pancake breakfast is always at Community Park. That one is pretty much set. Chili Fest, that's pretty much set. But like the movie nights, the egg hunt and the Oktoberfest that the HOA does are always at Purple Park. Well, now that we kind of have 4 parks that these things could really be held at, Founders Park, Community Park, Purple Park, and now Wildflower Park, do we want to make recommendations that it be considered to distribute some of these events at the different parks? As well as right now, the majority of things like graduations, weddings are like Purple Park. Do we want to suggest that maybe that those special events be opened up to Wildflower Park as well?
Are they restricted at other parks?
I don't know about
Which
restricted.
ones?
I mean, just.
Can they do a wedding
you
at
can-
Wildflower Park?
You can rent a pavilion on
Yeah,
any.
you rent, most of our weddings take place almost exclusively at Purple. We do a lot of weddings.
But nothing precludes them from,
No, we've had them at,
It's got the water feature.
Founders, we've had them at Community, most of them I think take place at Purple,
It's the most dramatic one.
Yeah, better pictures.
but,
But now Wildflower is there too.
yeah,
So-
Wildflower.
So if we feel as a committee that it would be beneficial to encourage, particularly the use of Wildflower for those events, we could make a recommendation to the board, or we could just leave it as a discussion point
And then I think the
not
other,
make any
the other
recommendation.
thing, Peter, sorry, cutting that in, is there's been lots and lots of dialogue about athletic activities at Wildflower Park. So I think that really is a gray area. I think it's been great throughout the entire process, kind of intentionally, knowing that at some point we have to have some kind of policy decision about athletic use up there. I think that is something that will need to be discussed. We designed that grass space big enough to have an athletic surface on there. The board has had policy discussions about trying to say, so we don't do any organized athletic activities at Founders Park with the exception of T-ball, but you can't do like organized soccer. So if soccer teams want to go over there and use it, they can just feel free to go over there and use it. The town doesn't have any control over it. The board does not allow any athletic activities at Purple Park, but you guys, I'm sure, have seen, the soccer groups will go over there and kind of use it. We've already had some soccer groups go over and use Wildflower Park, so I do think that, we'll probably need the board to weigh in on whether it's appropriate for athletic use up on that grass or not. So maybe that's another item
they use it as a drop-in. Whenever it's open, it's free for them to go and use it, right?
Right.
Without scheduling.
Right.
So could you just quickly summarize for residents, what is available
Sure.
currently to rent, to reserve?
Yep, so the small pavilion at Purple Park, the volleyball court, is available to rent. The HOA does Oktoberfest there and the Easter egg hunt. But I think they choose that location. We don't normally specify where they go. Community Park has a shelter that's rentable, as well as the athletic fields. And then Founders Park.
Sorry, at community, is that the shelter that's at the restrooms by the
Further
playground?
by the playground, yeah.
Yeah.
So that one gets rented a fair amount, and then the shelter, the large shelter at Founders Park is rentable in 2-hour chunks of time in the afternoons on the weekends.
And then you are now renting Wildflower?
We are renting Wildflower.
Is that restricted also to weekends? or-
That's not restricted. We were told just to get that going as quick as possible.
Can you clarify the difference between Founders and Wildflower? Because I know that we had lots of discussion about why you couldn't reserve time at
So-
Founders.
Right.
Founders basically goes back to when the park was basically first being established and expanded. Somewhere along the line, I don't know if it was a board member or the board in general, basically told the residents this will not be open for reservations. And that was generally meant to be the field, but it kind of got, the residents basically took it as a whole, a policy for the whole park.
Yeah.
And so they basically went to the board saying, well, you can't reserve any, you can't reserve pavilions, you can't reserve any.
Yeah.
And so that kind of was an unwritten rule.
Yeah.
Over time, largely through this committee, we encouraged the limited reservations of the pavilion, as well as the T-ball field. That met some resistance from original town residents, but so far, really, once that stuff got enacted, there haven't really been any complaints.
And to Peter's point, there has always been a discussion of, North Rock Creek has always had Purple Park. That was kind of their quiet open space. You could go there whenever you want. It wasn't inundated. There have always been conversations about original town not having that opportunity. And then that led to conversations of the south side of Rock Creek didn't have an opportunity. So I think that the conversation has gone, well, if one part of town has this unprogrammable park that's open for use, original town needed an unprogrammable park open for use, and the south side of Colton Wildflower Park. Now I think, and I've been very open with everybody, the staff 100% disagrees with that, because what tends to happen is if you take it out of the town's control, the sports groups take it over unmonitored. And some of you have heard this story. We've actually had to call the sheriff's department because we were getting athletic groups that were showing up at 1 and 2 in the afternoon and trying to stake out their fields, and another team would show up and we were having parent-on-parent conflicts.
And
So
yeah,
it's tough, and I think what we're starting to see even at Purple Park is Community Park is overfilled. So they'll say, well, we would like to pay you to use Purple Park. I say, well, you can't actually pay us to use Purple Park, but you can just show up and use it whenever you want. And I think that that's starting to happen at Wildflower. We've had numerous sports groups who say, look, you won't let us on Williams Field or Community Park, it's booked, but you built this field up at Wildflower Park. We said, well, we did, and you're right, the drawings did show that a soccer field can go there, but we're not going to allow you to pay us for it, but if you want to go up there unrestricted and use it. So I do think that it's something that the committee and the board is going to have to address. Because what's really damaging on the parks is when the sports teams get to run unfiltered on them.
Yeah.
So a little bit more background is Founders Park, for those that are familiar with it, has the boulders down the middle of the field. Originally, those weren't there. It was one
Yeah.
big field. It was being overrun by Ultimate Frisbee in particular, but there was also this conflicts between, Ultimate other groups that were trying to use it. And so the board at the time basically said, just put these boulders here. And that largely, it limited the amount of the field space, because it basically divided the field in two.
Mm-hmm.
So the groups like Ultimate, it was then too small, at least for them to play an actual game.
Yeah,
And so they just discouraged, they did that to just basically discourage use by certain people. But again, it didn't change the policy of actually reserving the field space or not. And then Wildflower Park, when that was being planned, the residents that lived there basically said, no, we don't want, programmed field space, particularly fields with lights. So we proceeded with, this is going to be a green lawn that is the size of whatever it was.
Size of soccer field.
I don't remember, what is it, like 14 or
Yeah.
something, soccer field. But this will not, it wasn't specifically said like how Founders Park kind of, basically was. It wasn't specifically said to the residents that this will not be programmed, but the general idea was, because we're not going to, we're not going to have lights on it, we're not going to stripe it type thing, that it's going to be left for pickup. It's not going to be programmed.
Neighborhood park.
But that
It's
doesn't.
supposed to be a neighborhood park.
Yeah, neighborhood park.
It's supposed
But
to
that
be-
doesn't mean that we can't,
Uptown.
we could address the sports thing, but that doesn't mean that we couldn't encourage it to be used for movie nights, weddings, those type of events. There was never anything specifically said to those residents that we would not do those things.
But just to add to the conversation too, the pavilions at Autry Park, or at Founders Park, were only because you guys were having so many problems with fights.
Mhm.
That was the instigation
Yeah.
to make that somewhat programmable,
Yeah.
because there was fights breaking out over who could use it.
Well, yeah, people,
Yeah.
again, were staking it
See, I
out,
thought you-
or they were showing up and
Wasn't
using
sure
it
you got around.
for 6
Wasn't-
hours
that was
or
the
whatever,
question you
all
guys
day
were
long.
Hanging all day,
Big
it's in my
time.
cooler.
Yeah,
Big time.
and so the idea was, to try to make it more equitable to everyone.
And the old town people, Daryl used to be on the board, was
Yeah.
totally against any programming whatsoever. That was the compromise. The compromise was the baseball can use it for this time of the day. The compromise can be, we're going to use 2-hour increments, where that pavilion should be programmed every day of the week, in my opinion. But, I also
It's a
think
good
the
size.
soccer fields up at Wildflower, but I lost on that one too, so.
Yeah, it is a little tough, and, when we talk about Founders Park, staff pushed just to put rental parameters around it, and actually saying, if you put some kind of control on it, you do have the authority then to say who can and who can't use it and what the circumstances are. Some of you guys who have been around forever know, we actually spend more money maintaining Founders Park as an athletic surface than we do the baseball fields at Community Park.
Wow.
Because of the unrestricted use on the playing surface. So I do think that is a reality at Wildflower Park, just based off the number of phone calls that we fielded by sports groups who want to rent it. And the response is, well, we're not going to rent it to you, but it's an open park. I think that it might be worth at least looking at. And I think, to your point too, the HOA movie nights are largely accepted. We do get phone calls every time they go about being too noisy, and it's, not fair that you have to listen to it. But you're right, Peter. I think even something CAPS has worked on is wanting to expand the community's reach into these other parks and expose community, get neighbors to meet neighbors at the park. So.
Well, and I'll bring up one other one, the bocce pit too, at the at the Arbor Day opening of Wildflower, there was people that asked if they could reserve the bocce pits for like every Wednesday and have like a bocce little league pickup, you know, for a couple hours every Wednesday night or something, you know. And right now that's not programmable, so the only thing you can say is show up. Hopefully, you know, no one's using it. You should be able to, you know, work your way in.
Is there an option, again, not knowing a lot of the background, so this has been very informative, to like have Monday through Friday programmable and then open on Saturdays and Sundays, so that if you want to do the type of, you know, hey, every Wednesday night, you have that option, but then on weekends, you're not restricting the community from using a community park?
Yeah, that's kind of what, do you guys remember what the parameters were on T-ball? Didn't we say something like that? It had to be like,
Monday through
what was it,
Friday.
around 4 hours during the week and 2 hours on the weekend?
Yeah, it was-
Three hours, 3 hours during the week and then 3 on the weekend.
I thought it was like they wanted a block
They
of
wanted-
games.
Yeah, and then it, yeah, so yes, I think that there is a precedence for saying,
Well,
we get it, we want to respect it being, you don't want to over-program either.
Right.
That's a legit problem, and I get
Right.
the fear.
so my question, like for Wildflower, the field, is do you feel that the desire to reserve that is more for practice or games?
I think it's practice.
So if we did say something like, well, you can reserve the lawn and the bocce pits for Monday through Friday, but it's
Yeah.
open on the weekends, and you can reserve the pavilion at any time, we would kind of be covering the major bases of, or, you know, the major
Mhm.
desire for who wants to reserve it.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest request that we've had is for graduations at the Octagon Overlook Pavilion. And then, and the smaller one, because it's crazy, the smaller pavilion's actually bigger than the pavilion
So
over
we
here.
got, they can have competing graduation
So
parties.
you could have, yeah, and we actually do have
It's a website.
booked graduation parties, which will be kind of fun to see the park. So graduation parties, we've had lots of calls for soccer practice. And actually, I think some of the groups that are over playing in Purple Park now are the groups that we said, hey, let us, you know, we've told people they can't be on Wildflower at least for a year anyway, for the establishment. So soccer practice, and then we have had somebody who wants to do like a outdoor basketball camp that we just said, you know, we'll hold off on that as well.
Okay. So, I mean, we could leave it at this discussion captured in the meeting notes, or we could actually make a recommendation. I mean, at this point, it sounds like you're pretty much proceeding with reserving the Wildflower as,
At least the pavilions.
you know,
The
the
pavilions.
pavilions.
And then I've heard a couple of trustees.
Well, and you are reserving, I mean, like the graduations, that's more than just a pavilion, but they're obviously going to be taking over probably the whole great lawn area.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of like Purple, you just rent the pavilion and then you kind of understand that that'll meander throughout.
So has anyone come forward asking to like put up tents or anything like that?
No, not yet. And then the other one, I know that probably stretching this out is, right now, the sports stable community room has been completely free. It actually gets used a ton by our groups in town as well as groups who also use that facility. We did get our very first request for a for-profit camp that didn't want to do any affiliation with the town to come in and use the room. And right now, we've just told them, we don't have the fee established for it, that it's probably not an appropriate use of the room to have for-profit business use a public community room.
What was what kind of time were they requesting?
They wanted every Thursday and Friday. I don't know, it was pretty prime time. And it was like a Lego camp, which we already had hosted. So, but that room, that's another room we may want to look at figuring out. Do you want fees on it? Do you look at putting fees on it for certain types of activities? Because we also have had in-town groups that are for-profit who want to provide like an activity for after school, but they don't want to run it through Parks and Rec, but they want to use the room. They also want to charge fees. So there's a bit of a slippery slope there. So right now, we've just told everybody that that's not how that room's intended to be used, and we'll discuss it.
Yeah, I mean, if we wanted to discuss that for a minute, I would say, yeah, if you have a resident wanting to reserve the room for a, you know, a community group, basically a nonprofit activity, you know, like if we wanted to have a, you know, a PROSTAC engagement over there, or if someone wanted to have a Boy Scout meeting, you know, something like that, then no cost. But if you have someone that wants to reserve it for a, you know, a profit
Business.
making business, whether you're a resident or not, there has to be a fee. But the problem there is, you know, yeah, how much time is it going to block out? Because if you have, you know, if you have someone taking every Thursday and Friday for an hour or two all school year, you know, for like 9 months, basically, that's taking a huge chunk of time away from the community. Whether it's generating money or not, it's taking a huge chunk of time. That's different than someone doing like, you know, just once a month or something like that.
Could there be a higher fee structure for profit? So we can make money, but sort of limit the use just based on the higher fees? So if you're...
And that's what would have to be discussed.
Well, you could also do it so that they could only do it for a certain time period, you know, say you can only reserve it for 3 months, and then you have to wait so much before you reserve the next 3 months, right? You can only reserve it like a month ahead of time or whatever it is, and only for 3 months. That way it's not constantly tied up and gives other people the opportunity to jump in. That's
Well,
another
yeah,
option.
you'd have to sit down
That's a lot
and
more
work
work
it
for you
out,
guys.
but you could say like no for-profit group can reserve it for more than X number of hours in a 3-month period or something like that.
Yeah, I was going to say, Peter, or Patrick, you might want to talk to the Community First Foundations. They have a community room down in Arvada, and they've put some pretty hard restrictions. I mean, like, the food bank was trying to use it, and we were very limited on how many times we could use it. So you might ask them what their policy is.
So that's something that, you know, maybe we can just try to get some more information on.
And I could come to the next meeting with
And
Well,
discuss.
yeah,
further.
generally speaking, correct me if I'm wrong, we usually will tell you, this is where we like, this is how we like to see the T-ball thing, that you guys take care of everything else.
Right.
We'll come to you and say, you know what, we think that community room shouldn't be free to, and then you say, okay, we'll take care of it from there. You guys,
Right.
as long as we, but then the board votes.
The T-ball one, we actually were the ones that debated the number of hours.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we pretty much said, we were specific about that.
But you said, you guys would do the rates and the
The
We
fees.
set the
rates,
rates.
right,
Because the
right.
rates will ultimately have to be approved by the board
Right.
as part of this year's budget process for next year. That's the other kind of tricky thing is.
I don't see anything wrong with us maybe putting something together and say, we need to see what we're gonna do with County Park and with the stable, and at least get some ideas over to the board saying,
Yeah,
I mean,
if you don't start organizing it now, when are you gonna do it?
Staff, I'll be honest, yeah, the staff has some concerns about, you know, we don't want to control it for the sake of controlling it, but not controlling your facilities is a dangerous, expensive way to run. And we just spent a lot of money on an unbelievable park that may need some controls around it.
So to answer your original question, Pete, I would say, let's just put it in the notes that
If
we
you build it,
discussed
they
it,
will
and then
come.
we got
Right.
something to send.
No, I
Especially build
agree.
it
I think
flat
we'll
and
just-
green in square shape.
They will come.
It will come.
Yeah.
There's a wavy trail.
Intros.
Okay, so final discussion topic, joint areas of interest to discuss with OSAC, the primary one being 5-year trails plan. Can anyone think of items that you would like, you know, PROSTAC to be discussing with OSAC? The primary ones have been overlap on trails. And the 5-year trails plan is a big part of it. The other part of it is the annual trail recommendations to the county, or, well, not just trail and open space acquisitions, recommendations to Boulder County open space. So, Patrick, the recommendation we made last year, it didn't go to the county until what, February of this year? When did they ask for it, or was it even March?
They didn't ask for it.
I thought they finally did ask for it.
They asked for, you know what, I'll have to look.
But it wasn't until like February or March.
It was, yeah.
So are we even going to make a recommendation to them this year, or is it going to basically
I
be
think
like
that's up to
next
you guys, whether
February,
you
March?
want to regurgitate the recommendation from last year and submit that info, or do you want to relook at it again and re-recommend?
So that'll be a discussion topic with OSAC. It will be how we want to handle the county recommendation, since the county, essentially, just so everyone knows, every year we would make a recommendation to the county on open space that we would like to see acquired, and usually it would be stuff that either was more ideal for the county to acquire, or things that maybe the town couldn't acquire outright, so we would need the assistance of the county. And then also trails that we would like to see that are on existing county open space. But then when the floods happened in September 2013, ever since then, the county has basically said, we will not be spending any money on this stuff because of flood repair work. And so the last 3 years or whatever, they have not accepted our recommendations. They finally came in and asked for it. And like I said, I think the deadline was February, March of this year. We made the recommendation back in June or July of last year. It just sat there until they finally asked for it. So it's a bit of a question mark at this point of if and when they're going to ask for the next recommendation.
And we do have 2 trails on the trail priorities list.
Right.
That was the FRICO, and they said seed money for it because it's the kind of 128th in the McCaslin area and the FRICO ditch that kind of comes out of.
Well, there's more than that on there that are county.
But those were on our list that we had.
Shan was actually purchased with the assistance of the county, right? Right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big one.
And so anything that we want to do, like a trailhead there, we cannot just do on our own. We have to do it in conjunction with the county.
Right, and that's a big discussion that I think OSAC will want because of the push for that development of that Shan property.
Yeah. And there's a handful of trails on there that actually are on the county open space. So, if we want to see them happen, even if we're willing to front some money for it, we can't just do it. The county has to approve it. And some, like the FRICO ditch one, the county's basically said we have no interest in this. Right? So it's remained on the trail list, but it's pretty much the county's going to shoot it down if we ever push really hard on it. We know that. So those will be, unless anyone can think of anything else, those will be our main discussion points.
I got 2 to add to the list if you want.
Okay.
One, do we want to talk about potentially having them support us with the volunteer opportunities if we're going to do any kind of trail maintenance at Coyote Ridge or any of these things? Talk about that.
Yeah.
The other one is it always seems that we run into this and we're like, oh, we wish we would have talked to them sooner, is if we want to do any kind of booth sharing for any of the events that come up, like 4th of July or any of these things, where we, instead of us doing our thing and them doing their thing, we want to do, any of this thing together. We can at least talk that.
I think it's been established that we're going to share a booth.
Yeah, I mean, so
Right.
at
Because we usually,
Arbor,
it's like right before the event, we're like, oh yeah, we should ask them.
at Arbor Day, we had our own booth. OSAC shared a booth with RCAC. The 2 of them are working together on this Great Superior cleanup or whatever they're calling it on Saturday. They had come to us about that, and I basically said that I knew we were going to want to do a Coyote Ridge Maintenance Day. I thought we should work on that as a joint thing. They went ahead with this Earth Day thing on their own with RCAC. so we kind of got left out of it. So them and RCAC shared a booth. Traditionally, we've ended up sharing a booth because there's been a lack of booth space at things like Chili Fest and 4th of
Being the
July.
person who was most against it, but the person who's also at them all, it really worked pretty well, and I'm now in favor
Yeah.
of sharing the booth. It gets
Oh,
more,
that's
you
good.
get more activity, but it also requires us to be a little bit more proactive, be organized for,
Yeah.
have something there to show, like the one year, July 4th, we had the big,
Right.
the Wildflower Park presentation there, so
Yeah.
it brought a lot of people interested in it, so.
Well, and just from being at a couple of them now, we've had the big foam court board of trail maps, and I know we didn't have that at this last Arbor Day, and, you know, having that one trail map to be able to talk about the trails and where parks are and what's in the parks, I think that's really a key thing. We just need a big board to show that, and people will come up and talk to you.
And the handout that you've got right there.
Yeah, this guy.
So
We were
we'll-
hoping that we would have the FAQ for Lakeshore,
Yeah.
but it's just,
Too short.
you know, I
Yeah.
think that.
Yeah, that was supposed to be our Arbor Day booth thing.
But from an overall, you know, about parks and trails, you know, and programmable space, I think that's a critical thing for our committee, is just that, you know, being able to show where the trails are, where proposed trails are, and where our current parks are, and what the, you know, potential rentable structures within it, you know, those type of things are a lot of the things that people really want to know about.
The only problem when we share a booth with them is, so if we're talking about a topic that there's overlap, like trails, it makes a lot of sense for us to be sharing the booth with OSAC. But then if people come up and start talking, say people come up and want to start talking about Lakeshore, for example, the OSAC people, either they don't know what to talk about it, or they have no business talking about it because they don't have it's not a topic of theirs. They don't have the background or the information on it. So it's like, well,
but
how do you delineate of, like, you know, if you're just kind of out there talking to the public in an open forum, it's a little bit of, you know, it's whoever comes up to you and starts talking about something, you start talking to them about it. And if it's not a topic that's appropriate for one committee or the other to be talking about, it's like.
But how is it any different if we have different booths and someone comes to talk
Right,
to them?
you kind of have
And
the
we
same,
don't know.
You kind of have the same problem, and
Well,
it falls on the shoulders of the committee member who's talking to be like, look, I'm not the right person to talk
Right.
about that. Go talk to Corbett, or go talk to Corey, or go talk to Peter,
It's also
or whoever is
up
there.
to us to man the booth and be there to represent and talk about it, because I've been at, you know, like, what was it, Chili Fest or a year ago, and we shared with OSAC, and when the recycling was right next to us, and somebody
Right.
talked about recycling, I'm like, you gotta talk to them over there, you know, but
Right.
you wanna talk about trails, I'll
Right,
be more
and
than
I almost
happy.
think it would even be easier in
You
that
know?
sense for, if we have different booths, and somebody goes up to them and says, hey, let's talk about Lakeshore, and we're not there, then they may be more prone to it, but if we're there, they're like, yeah, why don't you talk to this guy?
Right. So it just takes a little bit of effort
does.
on whatever committee members are there to say, I'm not the right person to talk to about that. The
Yeah, it
person
works
next
well
to
in
me
July
is.
4th.
Right.
So-
No, and
Both of
my
them
thought is,
work well.
we just want to talk to them about booths in general.
So I will, yeah, so I'll add that as a topic that we definitely, because we'll probably be sharing a booth at 4th of July and Chili Fest because of space.
Right.
Of saying, you know, let's discuss which topics we want to focus on.
Must have candy.
For discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need something better than
Well, the Frisbee golf-
that
the disc golf was great.
This time around with those little plastic cans, and every time you hit it with
Get creative. Get creative.
every time you hit it with the Frisbee, the thing like slid across the parking lot. So yeah, we'll maybe want to get something to draw people in and be a little bit more proactive.
Was that 2 years ago, July 4th, that we had the?
We had the
disc golf?
when we had
Back
the
home,
actual.
Football team?
Oh, yeah, in the
Yeah,
back.
when we had the
Yeah, it was
actual
back
net.
home.
Gotta
That
be
was-
careful with that, but
Yeah, that's right.
try to guard the booth.
Yeah, I mean, that
Just throw
that
it
definitely
in.
got people's attention, but it also had a lot of,
No, we've
a
had
lot
dog
of
biscuits,
Frisbees
we've had
flying.
dog
Collateral
stuff.
damage.
Yeah.
To bring
Well, yeah, that
attention to the
same
dogs.
one, we had the dog biscuits
Yeah,
and
to
water
bring attention to
bowl.
the cleanup after your dog and stuff.
Yeah. So, all right, with that, the look ahead, and one of those is dog waste.
Yeah, and I'll kind of go over these quick. Board and Planning Commission are going to review the Tract H open space FPP. This is just a slightly more black and white version of the concept that you guys saw a couple months back. So I'll include both committees' recommendations in the Tract H, which is this open space area between the town center and Rock Creek. Sometimes it's referred to as a buffer. So that'll be coming up. As Peter mentioned, last year as part of the expedited trail plan, there was a plan to kind of connect two trail segments together. We did the community engagement on it. I think that night we had maybe one or two people who had some concerns about the trail due to its elevation and potentially looking into their homes. That trail's still out there. I think that it's a trail that can be built. So if there is interest from the committees on going forward with it, I think it's just a matter of, do you take the public feedback and, is it thumbs up or is it thumbs down on building that trail? Boulder County Youth Corps, which we pay for every year, is available this summer to help out with that trail. I think if you do a Coyote Ridge Volunteer Day, I think it's an easy project.
If I remember correctly, though, the concern was they thought where the trail was going to be more access to look into their yard. But what we said no, it's probably more over here.
Setback. Yeah.
It's going to be set back a little bit, kind of, because it goes down like this, and it actually wouldn't do that. And they were like, "Oh, okay, I understand now." And they were actually a little bit more, amenable to it.
So I do think that if the committee this year wants to construct that, we have the layout. I think this is a fairly cheap trail that was on the expedited trails plan. So I just want to kind of keep that in the forefront of everybody's mind, is that trail out there. Just kind of a cool FYI, Allison on our Parks and Rec staff with Ashley, who's our contract ecologist, worked with a gal in the community who helps us out with PR to do a dog waste commercial. So today, if you're on the list, you should have seen the Pros Park Rec and Open Space newsletter. That video's in there. It's actually a pretty fun, kind of catchy, quirky video. If you guys don't get the e-blast from the town, just head to the website and sign up. During our busy months, we'll actually do a Parks and Recreation monthly e-blast. And then this year, I'd like to incorporate a committee corner. OSAC wrote something for us this month. I'd like PROSTAC to grab a month, Historic Commission to grab a month, CAPS, which is Cultural Arts, grab a month, the Youth Advisory, grab a month. So, there you go.
I'm watching the commercial.
Somebody else taking a tablet?
The beginning of it's hilarious.
I might be able to get it on mine.
Oh,
Here, hold on, Corbett. I'll see if I can pull it up on mine.
There's a kid crying because he got dog poo in his hands.
Oh, I know where that is.
So you get it on this.
Yeah, do you have it? Mine's not.
Yeah.
Look at you.
So I
But,
get that.
Allison on our staff actually did a ton of work to get this thing kind of produced and out the door.
That's so cool.
Kirsten, who helps us with PR. So let's see if we can. The Wi-Fi's not great in this room.
It says it's running and it's not.
So the e-blasts are different from like the town update things, because I have pretty much all the subscriptions for that, but I didn't get that.
You
So
should have got one if you're on.
It's the,
I don't know.
it just
I
came
was
out.
It came out late.
self-selected in
Okay.
for the Parks and Rec info.
I'll double check.
But,
It came out at
that's-
4:30.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, you should have got one this afternoon.
Yep, 425.
But
I rounded up.
we're off and
Be
running.
precise.
We'll see how
Cool.
the cleanup goes
30
this weekend. I hope it's great.
So this might be a coincidence, but I noticed, so I've got two dogs, but I noticed, so I walk them almost every
Yeah.
day, that spring break, there was a noticeable increase in lack of cleanup.
Oh, yes.
So I don't know if maybe
I
it's,
Probably
I can
teenagers.
Do you know what I'm getting at?
I can give you a whole, and summer's even worse.
okay.
I can give you book and tomb of, how this goes. So, we see it all every day.
Okay, yeah.
It
Okay.
is,
So I don't know, I think it's, so my guess on this is that it's mostly the teenagers that are walking dogs, maybe for their parents, no?
No, it actually is more with the line that more people are out now because the weather's better and and once you get the daylight savings times change, people are out later and they're wanting to do it because when they get home from work, they have more daylight, they want to walk more, and that's where you really see the trend.
Wow, okay.
But ultimately, this is a universal problem.
Yeah,
This is
right.
not a
You
Superior
go to the news all
problem.
the time and you see parks closing because of.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even a Colorado problem. It's,
No.
I've read articles in like, in
Well,
Oregon and.
The community
other
I lived
places,
at
it's
in
like-
Florida did the DNA testing
Yeah.
for the waste.
Was it an HOA that
Oh, here we go.
did it?
I'm Ashley Watt. I'm a wildlife ecologist for the town of Superior. Today, I will bit about dog poop. Dog poop is very, very different than the poop left by wild animals that live in our parks.
Start it over, because the beginning is the funnest part. When I tried to make it bigger, it,
You hit the wrong
oh, okay, it's staying.
Your fingers are fat as mine, you hit the wrong one.
Yeah.
That was my wife the other day when my kids brought it in the Christmas.
I'm Ashley Watt. I'm a wildlife ecologist for the town of Superior. Today, I will bit about dog poop. Dog poop is very, very different than the poop left by wild animals that live in our parks and on our open spaces. That food is from eating things like voles and grass, grasshoppers, and will biodegrade very quickly. On the other hand, none of the pet stores want you to open up a bag of rotting dog food, so they put lots of preservatives in there, which is going to stick around in our soil and eventually walk its way right down here into our water source. In fact, dog waste is one of the biggest contributors to bacterial water pollution.
For some perspective, the town of Superior is home to roughly 1,900 dogs. If every dog owner had the attitude that one small poop is no big deal, our community would quickly be buried. Over 1,400 pounds of it in just one day. Did you know that dog poop contains salmonella, E. coli, giardia, all kinds of nasty parasites, roundworm, hookworm, tapeworm, all of those things are in our habitat when we don't pick up after our dogs. Yuck. And it's really gross.
So unfortunately, the town of Superior has had a huge increase in calls from our fellow residents about the dog poop in our parks and on our playing fields, like Williams Field here. So just make sure when you're out with your dog, come prepared and pick it up.
We get lots of dog crap on there.
I don't think anyone would be saying that's dog poop.
That's a good commercial.
I'll tell you where I see the problem mostly.
Look at that.
Here's where I see the problem mostly, and I don't want to get into the whole debate about off-leash dogs. But it's the people who have their dogs in a leash know when their dog poop, and they actually are more likely to clean it up. The ones who have the off-leash dogs, especially when in that area, the dog is running and they're hiking on the trail or doing whatever, and the dog's behind them, goes poo real quick, the dog catches up, and they thought the dog, was just chasing after something else when it was actually going to the bathroom. They conveniently don't see it, and that's where you get the problem. And seriously,
Well,
I see
it's
it
the-
all the time.
And it's the more open space trails that people are more likely to actually bag it and just leave the bag.
So I think,
Because they don't want to carry it around because the garbage can is.
so that
you know,
doesn't
that
make
much
sense to me,
further
yeah,
away.
that why they do that. But I think, yeah, that's a big part of the problem. So I always have mine on a leash, and I agree, the ones that are like out roaming around. have
We can
opportunities.
see, my wife actually videos it at the time, like, okay,
So-
there's another dog off the leash and
The
pooing.
community that I used to live in Florida did the DNA testing thing, the HOA did it. So I don't know how much that costs to do or how controversial it is, but they didn't have a big problem with dog poo because basically, if, you had some waste left over, it would get tested and you get fined, I think it was $50. So,
How would they match it?
well, if you were a resident, you had to.
Yeah, your
You
dog.
had to register
Every part of the dog
bring in a
registration,
sample, and
you have
someone
to-
was lucky enough to be the
The tester.
receiver of all the samples.
You're gonna have to staff taking the swabs.
You know how
Swab
many?
of every dog.
So my point is I don't know how like expensive it would be to implement, or if there's any interest in it,
I
because.
think it's fairly expensive,
Okay.
but
it's a
my
third
understanding is
party.
the expense is offset by, I mean, it's an expensive registration. So, you know, because the registration's gotta cover the cost of the initial DNA testing, and then the fines are gonna cover the cost of
Right, 'cause
the
I think-
the independent testing
Yeah.
of when someone picks up the
I
dog
think,
food.
right, and I think it's a third-party service, and I think it's kind of like those traffic cameras that everyone loves, where they pay for themselves over time, and third-party service makes them a lot of money, because, yeah, when there's a $50 fine, you know, it all goes to that service.
But ones I've heard are a lot more than $50. Like, they're like several $100.
Yeah.
So my opinion on this is
Yeah.
the town is unwilling to enforce the off-leash issue, period.
Well, the
Which
town
they-
doesn't even require registration of
Oh,
dogs.
I know, but they're unwilling to even worry about, you know, enforcing the off-leash issue, which is, I think, part of the problem.
Yeah.
So if they're unwilling to enforce that, how are they going to, are they really willing to enforce this other thing?
I mean, the committee can always recommend to bring back the ranger. I mean, we presented the ranger position to the board several times. I mean, that recommendation's been out there.
It's, the whole thing is anything with
Right.
dogs, whether it's off-leash, the food, whatever.
You have an easier time telling
You're
somebody
gonna get a
it's
lot of
ugly
it.
than that their dog is off-leash or food.
Yeah, well, also, I mean.
Or to even make any type
Yeah.
of insinuation that they're a bad dog owner. It's like, I mean, forget about it. You're gonna do your cheat.
It is a sensitive issue, but like, I'm a dog owner, and I get annoyed when I see, you know, like the waste that's not picked up, or the bags that have the waste that
There
are
are
just left
certainly
there.
responsible dogs. I mean, it probably is the minority that ruined it for the majority.
This
So-
definitely is minority, because it's not so many, it's
No.
just that they stay there.
So what I know this is not an agenda item, but just real quick, what can PROSTAC do if we wanted to do something to try to address the problem? What could we do?
Well, like I said, I mean, we could make a recommendation that the town hire whether it's a full-time or part-time ranger to enforce the regulations we do have.
Okay.
We can make recommendations to do DNA testing, to make stricter regulations, basically. I mean, we can make a recommendation even just to do registration. I mean, the town doesn't even do that. To at least have some actual idea of, how many dogs are in town and who owns them, and that they're up to date on their vaccinations. I mean, the town's not even doing that right now.
Well, the registration, yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I mean, most towns and cities do have registration, but I don't think that would have a big impact on the.
Probably not, but I'm
waste
just
problem.
saying, those are some of the things we can do.
Right, okay.
I think for us right now, I mean, it really is staffing resource.
Okay.
I mean, we have less than 35 full-time staff in town.
But
And the police.
the registrations could help offset some, I mean, it's not gonna pay for all of it, but offset some cost
Sure,
of having.
and I think in
Yes.
previous
Staff.
recommendations, that's what we've thrown out there, is saying that, that the position could potentially pay for itself through a set of fines. So I do think that that's ultimately, I mean, because this isn't a new problem. Boulder County provides our law enforcement through a contract. We have asked that they've increased their animal control, and they've been out more, but.
And I will say that I have seen them
Yeah.
out more. I also think that, I know for a fact that the group, the off-leash group, has a community listserv that they share information with. And it's funny is, when they started patrolling more, those folks shifted the time that when they were out there to about an hour later.
Right.
We used to always see them at a certain time, now we see them an hour later. I don't know if it happened to coincide with the
Yeah.
daylight savings time, or the fact that they were patrolling at the same time, but
Right.
it was
And
coincidence.
that is some of the issues, we're paying for a fraction of a person from Boulder County who's also responsible for the rest of Boulder County. And I think I heard that they had 2 They have 2 animal control officers total for Boulder County.
And it's us, Boulder, Lines, it's
Yeah,
a big,
Longmont.
big area.
Including open space areas.
There's 2.
2.
Oh, that would explain. So, yeah, every now and then there's like a wandering dog or
Yep.
lost dogs, so I, take them in and call
Yeah.
the non-emergency number, and it's always an officer that shows up. Because the animal.
And we did increase the hours we pay for through Boulder County to help address it, but it's, you're right, and there's a predictability that comes along when you have somebody a fraction of the time, and it becomes very easy to cheat.
What is the fine for dog waste, lack of pickup?
I have yet to see anybody get a fine for picking. There's more
But-
for scolding.
For the ranger position, if it's.
Yeah, the only comment I want to make on the police department, the board actually asked Sergeant Chamberlain, because we've had a significant decrease in the number of traffic citations. And the problem is, we have increased crime in the town of Superior, and they don't have the time, they're doing
Right.
more actual crime situations as opposed to traffic. So if they don't have time to go after traffic, which they make money off traffic, I mean, I think it's awesome of us to say we want to go out and do dog patrol, but they're not going to do it because they're going to do crime first, then they're going to do traffic because they can make money at it, and they're not going to make a money. So I appreciate what you're saying, but let's be realistic. We're probably not going to get a lot of time. And if you guys believe strongly that this is an issue we want to address, then you need to think about what you want to do, because I don't think we can expect it for the police department.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we want them to be focusing on that.
Yeah, I mean, you know.
My son's scooter was stolen yesterday from school.
Report all that.
You should
Report all that stuff.
absolutely
And on next door, there was someone
Oh, it's
reported
been-
their car got stolen.
This is the
Well,
second time a scooter was stolen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, we definitely have an increase in this sort of whole
Yeah.
suburban area. It's not just.
So it's completely aside to PROSTAC, anything we need you guys to report, because statistically, it makes it easier for us to request additional funds to hire more officers. Doesn't matter, I don't want to say it doesn't matter if they find the scooter, it doesn't matter. If we don't have the statistics to go to the board as staff and say, look, this is what's happening, we have a hard time justifying bringing this stuff on. It's something that Corbett and his family has been great about, is helping us track dog off leash and dog waste. We've presented to bring on a part-time ranger who could do, what Ashley's doing on the biological side, who can help educate on, dog waste. But it's hard to pitch those kind of positions when you're pitching this multi-million-dollar budget when we don't have a lot to back them up, so.
And that's why I was curious about the
Yeah.
fine, if that's defined, because then you could get some idea of maybe the income from
Right.
lack of, from finding people.
Right.
So,
And I will say, and to Corbett's point, the town's very lenient. We don't typically, on anything, even in some extent, traffic citations, we tend to be very lenient. So I think that it's always been more of a encouragement instead of a reprimand, and I think it's starting to tip to where that's maybe not the most effective, at least for the dog waste issue. So all in all, we spent close to $10,000 last year between dog waste pickup and supplying dog bags. So we also have a huge issue with dog bags being stolen, which doesn't make sense, because you'd think if they're stolen, that they would pick it up. But we get the bags stolen and the problem's still the same.
It's malicious.
Yeah.
So is there a plan to kind of leverage this video and really just kind of promote the heck out of it, and maybe do some campaigns around it?
Yep, so it went out in the e-blast. It'll go out in the town newsletter. We're trying to figure out how to get it up on Channel 8 as well. And then, I think the two big things we want to push in Parks and Recreation this year is dog waste, and then we're doing a huge campaign for water safety. We also tend to have a bit of an issue with people not watching their children in the swimming pools.
What you could do, here's an idea. If
DNA testing.
No.
Children.
I think that's already done.
Well, I mean,
I'm serious about this one though.
the policy right now is that, like, what, is it
9 and over, they can get their own card.
No, we have a huge issue with parents who will, like, babies in the pool, but then parents are on the side of the pool.
Oh, but I was gonna say, right now, like, technically, I have a 10-year-old, I can just drop them off at the pool
Yeah.
and I'm not in trouble, right?
Yeah, we're not worried about that. We're worried about the 3 and under.
They have to get their own card.
So here's an idea that you guys could consider though, is on those movie nights, if you could have, before they play the movie, a public service
Yeah,
announcement.
that's a good
and
idea.
do the swimming pool thing, just play, that's
Don't let me
that's
forget
3 or
that.
4 of those things you could do before those. Just saying.
Don't let me
Skip
forget
the
that.
movie, yes.
That's a
People
great
start sitting
idea.
down and it's
I
no low
can
light.
talk to Jim about that.
I mean, it's a video link. As long as you have, or maybe we figure out how to put it on a CD, that gets better.
I wonder too if there's a possibility to create like a quick little pop-up poster presentation or something about the WHO issue that could go to every town event, whether it's in our
Yeah.
booth or OSAC's booth or whoever it is. So it's kind of always in front of people whenever they go by.
That's a great idea. Those are our two big messages. Those over the last couple of years have kind of been alarming issues. And the whole point about being a bad dog owner, boy, try being a 16-year-old to go talk to a mother of a 3-year-old and say, hey, could you maybe get just within arm's reach some of the issues we've had with parents screaming and yelling at our lifeguards has been ridiculous. So we're also buying.
United has a policy for that.
Yeah. We're also buying Coast Guard approved life jackets because we're seeing so many kids unattended, and the reaction from parents when we ask the parents to mind their children at the pool has just been, it's an issue, and nobody wants to see anybody get hurt in a swimming pool or worse. So those are our two big messages.
Okay.
Thank you.
Please do. I want it everywhere.
We're spending insane.
Some part of Corvette,
I mean,
the last
good.
national
Yeah.
park, we have what's called National Park
Yeah.
Association, and
I found
it's
laying
thousands
right
of parking
on
lot agencies
Well,
all over the country.
Like right, like
And it's
just
funny,
a
there's
block up
actually
on
people
the
who
sidewalk.
So the first one we went missing, we found it.
I saw it, it was like an
Study
extreme.
why
We
humans
found it, over by the
are
pool.
like feeling
And
like.
I think typically what happens is,
that it's
so
completely
he
appropriate
had
to
a-
get right into every pool.
he had a,
Yeah, that's strange. That's
we
It's
had
like
a
a
running club right
nationwide.
after school,
It's
so
not
then
just here, it's not
Yeah,
just
yeah,
here,
yeah.
it's a nationwide.
middle school kids get out.
Well, that's why I
see
mentioned the
these
DNA
things,
thing,
and
too, because
he had it
it
locked,
was
he didn't have it
definitely
locked.
less
You
actually.
can't really lock a way.
You
Yeah.
can,
But you just neighborhood where they had
go
that.
to the handlebars, if you,
So,
I was doing
My
one.
son puts it through the wheel of his car.
Right, or you put it, but my son didn't do that, he wrapped it around, did something weird thing on it, and then I just pulled it off.
Yeah.
It was easy to take.
Can you, does the school let you put it in the skateboard box inside?
No.
I don't.
You guys, we've got a historic commission presentation that I have to set up for.
so leave these here.
Yeah, I got it set up for tomorrow morning.
Oh, we just took away all the chairs.
Tomorrow night. What's up, stranger? Let's meet. I chatted with someone last week. Figured out.
Thanks, Cindy.
Thank you, guys.
So,
Thanks, Beth.
I know when I was
See you guys.
appointed, they said that, and I'm so confused with this, they said that I was replacing somebody who was already a year into their 3-year appointment, and that I only had a 2-year appointment to this, and that was like 2 years ago.
You know what, honestly,
I got
I
it.
don't know how to stagger.
So,
No, I got it right here.
Do you have it?
Let me pull it up. Let's see if I can find it.
I'll be honest, I can't keep this straight.
Well, I tell you, it was drama when they were saying Peters in my terms. Well,
Corbett is up.
It's
I know,
always wrong.
Corbett is up this
June.
June, and Corey is up this June.
But
We're on
eligible
it.
for
But you
another,
guys
but
were on
eligible for
partial
another
terms, though.
3.
You weren't on full year term.
Oh,
were on
you
full
have
3-year
another
terms,
term.
were you?
right,
Yeah.
so how does that work? Do they just reappoint, or do I have to apply again?
You, unless you're not interested, yes, they'd have to reappoint
They
you.
have to technically reappoint you, but it's not like
So I'm
you're.
done in a couple months.
It's not like you're not. It's not like you can lose your position unless you want to.
Okay, so do I have to reapply, is there anything I have to do?
The-
If you're not interested, You let me know, I email the board.
Okay.
And say you're not interested, we open it up.
So, yeah,
you're
as
not
far
going
as-
And neither are you, so we're set. How you like them?
So as far as like
nowhere.
expiring terms, Ron expires in June of this year, and he's term limited. And I expire
But you're next year.
June
We
of
were
next
next
year,
year, yeah.
and I'm term limited. But no one else on the list is term limited. Everyone else has a term after the date listed here. So you and Corey both have another 3-year term added on to this June, so you would go to 2020. And then everyone else is basically another 3 years from either next year or the
I
following.
remember, I came on right before. Peter
But I
became
guess it makes
chair.
sense because,
Yeah.
I mean, we were at the end of our 6 years, so we had 1 year left of this year.
Well, yeah, Ron was pretty sure that he picked up a partial term.
I think he did too.
And he had another term, but Martin says no.
Well, you could certainly go back in the minutes and you can figure it out.
How do you know?
What is a term partial?
Yeah, some.
I mean, two 3-year terms, but if you picked up a partial, but if you picked up a
Yeah.
partial
It's 2
term.
years.
But
She's on
see,
for-
if you have a partial, then you can have
We have 4
2
people that came on.
3-year terms.
That
after
was-
that. So
that
you
was
could
my
have
understanding.
potentially 8 years.
Well,
That was my understanding,
I will
but,
say-
but that's where Ron stands.
This is
He,
the town
he thought he
manager.
had 2 3-year terms after his partial, and Martin's where
He's wrong.
I think Martin's wrong too, but that's what
He's wrong.
that's what he told
I
me
think that,
and Ron.
I don't know, but I think they did go back through all the minutes.
Yeah.
Because I mean, that spreadsheet is pretty thorough.
Well, they went back then since Peters and I came up because Martin insisted that Peter and I were done.
Yeah,
And he was wrong.
so I thought both of you guys were done this year, but eligible for another.
I'm pretty sure that, at least myself,
No, we're
I'm pretty
through
sure
2018.
I did not take a partial term when I
I
came
didn't
in.
either.
I started on a 3-year
So
term.
this is your-
So I will only have 6 years.
So this is
Yeah.
your 6th, how many years have you been on?
This will be,
You'll
June will
start
be
at 6.
5 years, and
Yeah.
then I'll be
5.
entering my last year.
So, yeah.
Which means technically next year, someone else will probably have to be chair, because unless I'm just gonna be 6 months.
Well, the board is,
Oh, it's a quick one.
the board had mentioned at this year's budget process reviewing functionality of both committees.
Well, that's right. If
So
they-
then
they
you
decide
look
to
at,
merge.
if there's a merge, then everything starts over.
Well, that will be what the board will decide.
Right.
Do they start everyone at 0? Or do they run out for Peter comes out?
Well, we talked about doing the merge when both committees were really low, because the number would have made sense. Because we had 4. Yeah. So, but who knows?
All right.
But I don't have to go trying to figure
There's
that
no
out.
way that Ron is off permanently this year, because he came on after you and I did.
I said the
Ron, I
same-
thought
I
Ron was on
said-
before you guys.
No,
No,
Ron
I
came on, I
think
thought, since I've
Ron
been
came
here.
on after us.
I'm pretty
Really?
sure he came on after, because Ron was
I've got all
on
the minutes, I'm
Ron was
sure.
on the architectural committee before me. And then I joined PROSTAC and Jim got me to join the UCC. And it was at that point that Ron then joined PROSTAC.
He came
So
on after
it was
you.
after I was already on.
Because Peter and Brett and I came on at the same time. And,
We're just trying to figure out when everybody
yeah, I don't
was
think
on
you're,
and started.
I'm done.
no, you're not.
No, I saw the.
That memo is
Well,
wrong.
we're saying we.
That memo is wrong.
Martin's wrong. But
Because you
Martin-
were not on the board
So they
when
must
Peter
have
and
just
I came on.
I came on.
You came on after us.
It's like,
He was. I'm telling you, Martin's got it wrong.
Which is why Jim thought, originally when it was really proposed to me, I was taking over somebody's job.
He was, and so you get to finish that term, and then you get 2 3-year terms after that.
But originally to get back in, the board had reached out to Tom Smith.
I talked to him.
Oh, yeah, yeah. so
Can
you're
you,
telling me
can you
that-
make the connection?
Yeah, I don't know.
You guys
I
haven't
don't-
spoken with them at all? Okay. I'll try to grab them.
Yeah, tell, give my email number.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna-
Yeah, I'd love to talk to her.
Tom Smith.
December, whichever one's closest.
Fairwater way.
Oh.
Got out in about 2000. Living my whole family.
Right. Oh, yeah.
And then he retired. You go to the women's basketball games up at CU?
I haven't been
Is that him?
recently.
He's the rep on the sideline.
Oh, nice.
He's the scorekeeper.
Nice.
And
And
then
he
he
ran
ran
Lakeshore?
Lakeshore when the first one for years.
Good to know.
So you
Because I
know
was
that.
able to track down the original structural engineer and soils engineer when it was built. And then, yeah, it'd be good to know.
Yeah, I would definitely get with this.
Because, well, I think.
I went to St. Patrick's Day party, so I know.
Yeah, tell him to.
I see him at Lakeshore all the time, so.
I mean, literally Lakeshore 24/7, trying to get everything figured out.
You
So
would
more
probably,
info, the
and he's a
better.
town resident too, so
Yeah.
it's not just like he's a.
More info, the better.
So Peter, did you get a list from Martin of all the committee, of all of your committee?
Let me know, I mean, I'm good either way.
Will
Who's
you,
playing soccer for right now? Broomfield?
will you send that to me and I'll find time to go back and check this, because I know he's not done.
The only thing is if you go back to the resolution, the 2012 resolution,
Broomfield all of a sudden.
that maps out, I think, the terms.
It's all about coaches.
So the only thing is if Ron could have taken over a partial term that was specifically named in the resolution as being restricted
But I don't,
to one term.
I do not think he did.
That's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah. You're a trail one?
Yeah, that's where my daughter's right now.
No,
Every Monday and Wednesday from 8 to 9:30.
because I'm trying to think whose term he took.
144th and not, so. Yeah. So.
That you'll have to go back to the resolution, the 2012 resolution.
But yeah, he.
But I'll forward, I
there's
just
no way.
forwarded you.
Well,
the
that's how this
email
place
from
was
Mark.
15, 18 years ago.
Yeah.
So
Because remember, we had a big argument with him about our terms, and he was wrong about those too.
open space, right?
And, you know,
Yeah, you told me you're
like
going to Chicago.
the stage, Martin, doesn't always do things as thoroughly as he could, but he doesn't always do things as thoroughly as he could.
Yeah, no, we went back to Storm North. She has a long relationship.
I don't think he had one of them.
The only club we never really ever played with was this.
Yeah, it's weird. The soccer dynamic just keeps changing, and I think what's happened is there's so many. Now I'm getting chirped at because kids are all over. So
Now that we're in high school, she's
Yeah.
in the club.
I mean,
The one thing we found out, and what they always told us, was high school soccer is a joke. High school soccer is a joke. It's an absolute joke. It is the most unbelievable thing I ever.
You know what's crazy? So I'm starting to learn that too, just a little bit about the hockey world now. Not hockey, but what I thought was the state tournament that Monarch won, and I started talking to these guys, and they said, "Well, why don't you stop by on this Friday and actually watch what actual U18 hockey is all about?" And then you go down there, and there's guys 5 inches taller than me, who are 18, 19, who have French translators, Russian translators. They have an area where scouts are supposed to be because they can't talk. And I'm like, oh, that's real hockey.
He hates to not be the last one out.
My wife always says I like being the last one, so.
I got the lesson.
Yeah.
Well, let me know about it. If Martin's wrong,
Yeah.
I'm more than willing to stay. but
Unless,
if it's my
as
time,
Peter
I'm
said,
also
there was
more than willing
something
to
about the
stay.
fact that
What
you
are you
took
thinking,